Heather, they need agendas back here too. You guys got agenda to follow?
Yeah, I brought my own.
Okay, I think we're ready to go. All rise, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moment of silence. Please be seated. Citizens' concerns.
Good morning. I'm Susan McGuire, 2849 South Cedar Street here in Sioux City. And after being blindsided a little bit last week by the gaming revenue grant discussion and the way that the vote turned out, I had a little time to go home and think about some issues and some concerns that I had, and I thank you for giving me the opportunity to present those to you today. I apologize, I'm not a good improv speaker. I never was when I coached speech, and I still am not, so I've written them down so that I don't miss anything and I don't take up a lot of extra time umming and ahhing. First and foremost, I would like to say that my concerns have nothing to do with Center for Siouxland or any other nonprofits not being funded with the gaming revenue tax. I've applied for many grants, some of which I have not been awarded, some of which I have. This isn't the first one that I won't be awarded. It's not the last one I won't be awarded. And, you know, it's just the nature of the beast. I will say, however, that this is the first one that I've applied for where the eligibility requirements have basically been changed without notifying the applicants and after the application deadline. And so that, you know, blew me out of the water just a little bit. Secondly, I would like to say that following last week's meeting and my correspondence with supervisors and the county auditor, I went back and did some fact-finding and listened to the February 10th Board of Supervisors meeting. It has been indicated to me that the gaming revenue grant RFP was put out only after Mr. Boykin lost the November election as a way for the old board to kind of stick it to the new board. But that doesn't seem to ring true when you look at the things that took place before the November election. First of all, the RFP process, the guidelines, the checklist, and the application were initially discussed on July 29th. And that same day, a motion was made and passed approving and authorizing the chairperson to sign assurance for a gaming revenue grant for fiscal year 2015-16. Munson, Smith, Clausen, and Boykin voted aye. Tripp opposed. The news story ran on KTIV and I'm sure many other media outlets. We went on the county's website, we had access to the application, and at that time the application was due December 16th. That's the application, if you look at mine, that I turned in because I wasn't aware that there was a different application with a different due date. The RFP process was again brought before the supervisors on December 2nd. Tripp was out, Mr. Ong had been elected and he had taken his place, and again a motion was made and passed to issue a call for applications for grants to nonprofit agencies funded through gaming revenues. It seems a little redundant that we voted on it and passed it twice because it had already been approved in July, but it was done. And again, the motion passed with Munson, Smith, Clausen, and Ung voting aye, and Boykin abstained. The press release went out, and this one had a deadline of December 23rd, which, as I already said, I didn't realize the deadline had changed because I had already gotten the application. In both of the applications and the press release, it stated, starting in fiscal year 2016, the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors will set aside $80,000 as a way to give back to the community in perpetuity. Each year, the county will award these funds to local nonprofit organizations through a competitive grant process. And that's the process that was approved. Fast forward to last week, February 10th, 2015. The agenda seemingly separates the nonprofits into three groups. A through F included gang outreach and those who had been funded in the past and who met the new criteria, which was deemed to be a core function of county government and can leverage federal and state dollars, which was explained by Mr. Taylor, I believe. G through I, those who have been funded in the past but who do not meet the new criteria. And J through S, those who have applied for the gaming revenue grant. According to the December 24th Journal, all of the nonprofits listed under agenda item, I believe it was 13, had applied for gaming revenue grant, except for the gang outreach program and the Mobile Senior Center, which was considered and was not funded. Yet in listening to the supervisors when they were questioned about the gaming revenue grant, some acted as if this were the first time they were hearing about the process they had approved, twice. Another supervisor claimed a difference in philosophy between December's board and February's board. But in truth, the only really new member who had never voted on this before was Mr. Taylor. I've looked. I cannot find anywhere in the minutes where the new board voted to reject the gaming revenue grant or the process established in July. I also could not find anywhere in the minutes since Mr. Taylor joined the board in January where the new criteria for awarding funding was set. On February 10th, Mr. Taylor expressed his opinion that funding could be awarded to those nonprofits that, one, provide a service deemed to be a core function of county government, but that wasn't clearly defined, so I'm not exactly sure what that all entails, but hopefully it will be. And number two, can leverage matching dollars. Mr. Munson stated that he didn't think the county should start a grant program, but they had already started a grant program they had approved twice. In an opinion piece that ran in the Sioux City Journal this past Sunday, February 15th, following a meeting Wednesday, February 11th, between Mr. Munson and the Journal's editorial board, Mr. Munson said, "Supervisors this year will develop a specific criteria for awarding money to nonprofits. Moving forward, the board will award funding only to nonprofits who use county money as match for securing significant amounts of money from other sources and who provide broad county-wide services." So my question is, have these criteria already been developed and put into practice as evidenced at last week's board meeting approving county funding for 4 nonprofits? Are these going to be the only criteria that you provide match money on county-wide services? Or are they still being developed? And will the criteria be defined, especially with regards to what services are deemed a core function of county government and providing broad county services? As well as what county dollars will be used to match. Are they going to be used only for state and federal funding, or are you going to look at the entire program budget as we did when we pointed out that CERTS matches their $33,000 with $2.5 million? Because it's not all state and federal money, as Dwight pointed out. About $600,000 of it is, and that's spread out over 5 counties. And if the new criteria hasn't already been put to a vote so that all of the supervisors had the chance to voice agreement on or opposition to how nonprofits will be funded with county dollars, will it be put to a vote? And finally, will the new process be clearly defined? Will the criteria be open to all nonprofits who wish to apply? In closing, thank you for your time. I really appreciate the opportunity to voice my concerns. I truly hope that you will develop a process that is fair, open, and transparent for all nonprofits. As it stands, we applied for the gaming revenue grant for a project that we were looking to expand, and because at the time the only criteria were that we be a Woodbury County nonprofit and we serve Woodbury County residents. There was no match requirement, although we did have to prove where the rest of our budgeting money was going to come from for that program, which we did. Had we known the real requirements for using county money as match to secure significant amount of funding from other sources, such as federal and state sources, and providing broad county-wide services that were deemed to be a core function of county government, we most certainly would have applied for a different program, because the program we applied for is not the only one that we have. So again, thank you for your time, thank you for your consideration, and thank you for the opportunity to be heard.
Thank you, Susan. Anyone else?
Is there going to be a response?
You want to respond?
Well, she asked a number of questions. I think they deserve an answer.
My response is that there will be a policy in hopefully next week's agenda.
But, excuse me, you actually do have a policy already?
No.
Yes, you do. You have a policy now that you are not upholding. I have a letter to the Board of Supervisors that is signed, and the state of Iowa is asking what statute you used to circumvent that policy.
If I may address this?
Sure.
A policy in a prior year by a prior board, especially when obligating funds, does not have the force of law or any effect of binding policy. If you look at the policy, it's to allocate $80,000 in perpetuity.
Yes.
And if our assistant county attorney wants to weigh in on this, I think that you'll find that statutorily you cannot bind funds, just as an outgoing board couldn't obligate future boards to reduce taxation by 15% for the next 400, 500 years into perpetuity, and so has no ultimate effect. Should the policy have been rescinded as a best practice? That's probably something that this board should have taken a look at. But if that needs to have statutory definition, that's where I would leave it.
That's what, I'm sorry, my name is Don Dew. I'm with the Disabilities Resource Center and the executive director. We too applied for the grant. And it's not about whether we received a grant or not. It's the process of going through that. There was not the right process. And whether you were voted in and didn't agree with a policy doesn't make that policy void.
I agree with you. The policy is void by the fact that the policy cannot allocate funds into, and I quote, perpetuity of $80,000. That's where the policy falls down flat.
That's not the main function of that grant at all. That's an FAQ in that grant policy. That's just part of that. That's part of the checklist. So if you look at the grant policy itself, that was going to start in, and it has started in fiscal year 2016. You had numerous times to say, no, this is not going to happen, before people actually handed in their applications. So here's the letter. The state ombudsman would like to know what authority you have to revoke your own policy.
Could, just for the procedure, could you read the letter and present it to the board, and the board can take action to receive the letter?
Dear Supervisors, at your February 10th, 2015 meeting, you voted to no longer fund nonprofit groups using the RFP grant-making process previously approved at your meetings on July 29th, 2014 and December 2nd, 2014. You made this decision after publicly requesting that such groups apply for funding from the county. You ignored your own precedent of funding nonprofit organizations who provide valuable resources within our county and wasted the valuable time of many organizations whose time is stretched to the breaking point already. Please provide us with the pertinent statute you used to make the decision to eliminate the RFP grant-making process. We await your response. And it has my signature of Johnette, the Executive Director of Center for Siouxland, and Marion Burnett, the Executive Director of the Crittenden Center. And then it has been sent to the Ombudsman's office, and they're awaiting the response also.
So this letter isn't from the Ombudsman?
This is what they told me to write.
Just to clarify,
So I drafted it at their behest.
you called the state ombudsman's office, and they told you the first step is that you have to present a letter to the board asking those questions. The board has to respond, and then you go to the ombudsman.
They were beside themselves that you even did this. I sent them the policy. I sent them the news footage of what you've done, and they couldn't believe it. So, yes, this is the first step.
So are you presenting this letter?
I am presenting this letter to the board for you to maybe rectify a decision that I see as terrible at its least.
Thank you.
You should do a motion to receive.
I move to receive.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Thank you. All right. Need approval of this agenda?
There's
Mr. Chair.
another person.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
Harold Mettenbrink, live at 3301 Walden Avenue here in Sioux City. I have a question, maybe a little different. The discussion that seems to go on and on, one point back to another. I've been in the county for, I don't know, 40, 50 years. This is my second meeting, which indicates, I guess, that I haven't paid enough attention. But on the other hand, there's the school board and the city and any other places that you might want to spend your time. My question is, we talk about policy and approval of policy. My question is very simple. What authority does the board have to spend county money to the charitable organizations that you're spending? I have no problem with your what, $25 million budget and roads and courthouse and so on, county money for county purposes. I have a real problem with taxpayer money going to charities. With you, to me, you've accepted a responsibility, to me has no satisfactory answer for everybody. Everybody's wondering, well, how do I get part of it? And you didn't do it right, and the percentage isn't right, and the arguments go on and on. I guess my question is very simple. What authority does the board have to spend county money for charitable purposes?
Mr. Chairperson, I just want to qualify something, and then I'll defer to the county attorney's office. But in order to answer the first question that Susan McGuire had, our office does the minutes, takes care of the motion, and we put them together. The board approves them. In July 29th, what appeared on the agenda at that time was discussion and action improving guidelines, checklist proposal, grant assurances for a gaming revenue grant program for 2015-2016. So in my mind, what was occurring at that time is the board was merely approving the RFP, the document that Mr. Butler presented to the board. You prepared that document, right, Dennis? Okay. So that's what occurred on July 29th. I wasn't there, and it says something about the assurances, and that was a mistake because I wasn't here. We had a deputy auditor or deputy commissioner of elections who was doing the minutes, but that's not what that motion should have said. And it said to because the clerks in our office prepare the minutes before we even start, and it said the assurances, and that merely was when someone did a grant, submitted a grant, the chairperson signs that at that time, is to signify that the grant has been applied. So that was a mistake in those minutes, that it said that the assurances. That's the explanation for that. What they did during that period of time is to approve that document for the RP. So that was the only thing they did. During that time, they discussed, Mr. Butler said that during the meet sometime in October, they would issue a call for people to apply for those grants. And that didn't occur until December. And at the December 2nd meeting, because Mr. Butler was having conversations with the leadership of the board at that time about when they were going to do that, because they said originally it was going to be in October. But it got into the election that part of the time, so it was delayed. So then they put it on the agenda. Mr. Butler and I actually had a discussion about this, whether he should be doing it, because what would occur is exactly what did occur, is the potential is that we had the conversation that board cannot bind an incoming board to those that type of thing. But he said that the leadership at that time requested him to prepare that document and put it on the agenda, and that's what occurred during that period of time. Okay, so they went ahead and did that at that time, and there were, I think I forget what the vote was, 5-0 or something like that. But then they issued the call for December 2nd, and then when they sent out to the newsletter, they said that, or the release, the press release said that you had until December 23rd to present these grants, to apply for the grant. So he extended the deadline, and that wasn't even discussed at that board meeting, but they did during the press release was issued, said December 23rd. So as far as the transparent part of that process, I'm going to defer to, or I'm just going to say is that They issued the call for the grants, and then at the board meeting is when they make that determination whether they're going to fund those grants. Because as Mr. Butler said during the December 2nd meeting, he said that you could decide at that time to spend more than the $80,000, less than the $80,000, or nothing at all. That's what was actually said at that meeting, and they moved on it. They moved at it that time. So then it appears on the board meeting, and that's when that process, that's when they make that decision whether or not they're going to be funding. That's the process. They approved the grant, they issued the call, and then they decided whether or not they were going to fund them at that election, at that meeting last week. That's what occurred. After having a discussion with Ms. McGuire and receiving the emails from Mr. Dew and learning what was going to take place, I talked to the county attorney's office to find out if it was true that there isn't any, if they can buy that board meeting. So I will ask Mr. Woodman to respond to that, and also the fact, well, just go on with that, about binding a board.
Right. As Mr. Taylor mentioned earlier, the Board of Supervisors each year, when they go through the budget process, has the ability to set the budget, determine where the funding goes. And a prior board cannot force a board to take any specific action in regards to a specific item, with a very few limited exceptions. It would be, if there's a contract that is over multiple years, or paying off of debt, those are probably the only two exceptions that I can think of where a board can bind a future board. But other than that, when it comes to a policy determination, as far as funding specific programs, each board each year has the ability to make that determination of where the funds should go.
Now, on to your next question about the authority to do that. I also asked the county attorney about that. What they were talking about was gaming revenues, and there are no restrictions. You can answer that one, but as far as the money, those gaming revenues that come. And we've had this discussion not too long ago about what we look for when grants are approved the auditor's office, and that goes to public purpose. So Mr. Woodman can respond to that too.
Right. The statute related to the funding source, or the gaming funds, just indicates that they go into the general fund of the county. At that point, they're public funds, and the public purpose test is basically the criteria that the board has to look at. And as far as when a public purpose is met, you look at the public safety, health, welfare types of items that can't be spent for the interest of a private interest. It has to be, a general public purpose. So when reviewing, grants are okay if that public purpose is met.
Probably more than you wanted to know.
I got a lot of information. I don't know what to do with them all. I guess my question still is, why does the board and the county even want to get into it? Why not just let somebody else make that decision? It just troubles me that really we're going with public money, because you said it goes in the general fund. I assume that because of that, it could be spent to build a new bridge.
I think that's pretty close to what we did last week.
And
Yeah, I would just add that last week was at least my attempt to get us started down a track of exactly what you're talking about creating criteria. We have at least two criteria that we discussed last week, which is more than we had before, and we paired them back. And so that, it's not something you can do in one meeting, but we're definitely headed in that direction.
A tremendous amount of work done by the board and the county and all of the people that are applying for money. And I'm just, in my own opinion, why do you want to even get into it?
There's more than just what's happened, the makeup of the board has not changed. We only have one new member that did not vote on the approximately $80,000 that we were going to use to fund nonprofits. Nonprofits serve a purpose. It's a quality of life issue in a lot of cases. There's a lot of state and federal money that is dried up where organizations that provide services to people, they have to, we're probably the last resort. And we are not using taxpayers' dollars, it's gaming dollars. And the board has that authority, and that's what we chose to do, to advertise up to $80,000, I believe, more or less, to organizations that provide a service to the public. Now, when that changed, how that changed, I don't have a clue. But what's going on now is the riverboat money is being used to fund county programs. It's a very poor budgeting practice, but that's what's going on.
That would be Mr. Clausen's opinion.
That is, I clarified that to begin with. That was Mr. Monson's opinion and Mr. Ung's opinion in December. So that's changed.
But never mind. And what I would just add to that is we did vote $260,000 from property taxes that I know we're not in complete agreement on. I know there are a couple of nonprofits to the total of $260,000 that Supervisor Clausen wanted to support with property taxes. I think generally speaking, you'll see the majority of the board has changed, and that philosophy has changed. Should gaming revenues be used to fund nonprofits or equipment replacement? Can it be used for property tax relief? Absolutely. Can it be used for a new bridge? That's the sort of discussion that we're having now, where we're looking at core services versus non-mandated services, and whether it makes more sense to make some of those statutory functions of government that we're tasked with doing. So I appreciate your opinion.
Well,
Share it.
I guess just as a taxpayer, I mean, every time I go to pay my taxes, I get a lump in my throat and think, you know, things have changed all around the country, really. And I have no problem with any of the charitable organizations per se. I have some that are favorites, the same as everybody else does. So when you say, oh, I'm going to take your tax dollars and put it over there, I'm saying, why do you even want to get into that discussion?
It's not tax dollars. You've got to separate.
Company, okay, but he says it goes in the revenue, so it is county money.
It's county money, but it's not tax dollars.
Well,
Except for the $260,000 from last week.
That's where I guess we get into all the discussion. Tax dollars or government dollars or county dollars or charitable dollars. There's some real fine lines there that I guess I just don't understand.
And it's whether you believe in prevention dollars or incarceration dollars. Now, I think you get more bang for the buck with prevention than you do dealing with it if you don't prevent it.
Okay, but then you're picking maybe one or two charities that you say are more county related than others. So now you got another criteria involved. I just have a real problem.
I understand.
Using county dollars for charitable purposes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Uh-oh. Mr. Williams.
Thank you very much. Your time is precious, and we've taken up a good deal of it. I apologize. I was not able to attend the meeting last week because I had a prior appointment. I do want to speak to the gang prevention programs, or to that particular aspect. And in light of the conversation that we've just had, I would draw a certain distinction between nonprofits and charitable organizations. Nonprofits may be charitable. Charitable and nonprofit are not exactly the same. And nonprofits often have multiple purposes. Some of those purposes can meet needs that fall within the public purpose. Gangs, and I speak as a former superintendent of schools, constitute a public nuisance, if not a public safety issue. And because of that, and because of how that cuts across multiple municipalities and state lines, in fact, in this area, it is something that specialists who understand gangs can be very helpful to political entities. And therefore, and this will be the summation, therefore I think that the county is able to and should carefully consider prevention programs such as gang prevention programs. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you.
Oh, one other thing, if I might. It has been suggested that organizations that do not receive funding that they've received in the past can look to other sources, including churches. I don't disagree. For instance, if I take the Sanford Center, I don't disagree that churches have a role to play in providing after-school programming. Maybe even the school district has a responsibility there. I would, and food during the summer. My particular faith church does actively engage in funding of that sort. But from the standpoint of the member of a church, I would draw a distinction, just as others are drawing a distinction here, that it is not a primary purpose of a church to support public safety programs. I think that falls very much in the jurisdiction of municipalities and county commissions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Okay, we're going to move on. I need a motion to approve the agenda for today.
So move, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Approval of minutes of last week. Need a motion.
Move on the minutes as corrected.
Very good. Need a second?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. Discussion and approval of the claims. Yes, sir.
I have a couple points of clarification on the claims, Mr. Chair. I don't see detail on claim 000100 is Becky Clausen in the amount of $293.45. And I understand Human Resources, you may
Yes, what happened with Becky Clausen, this is out of a settlement involving an injury of sorts, workman's comp type of claim. There's an ongoing settlement that would be $293 a week for the remainder of her life.
Is that something that, can we just add that in the claim so that people know what this is for?
We could. We've typically had it as something that we kept essentially private, but we certainly can add that.
Okay, appreciate that. And then I have some other claims that I have questions on in juvenile detention. I have a claim for daily supplies 000300 from May 8th of 2013. And I have no idea how a claim 2 fiscal years ago for $75.61. I was able to receive some more clarification on those supplies to Shopko, but also we have one from June 11th of 2014 for kitchen supplies. That's the last fiscal year. These to me aren't timely, and then I'll have one other question on juvenile detention claims. But
hi, Jean Jessen, the auditor's office.
Gene, pull that mic to you.
Sorry. We actually had a brief discussion with Mark yesterday, and he merely said it was those two were missed in his process. In the past, we have always, if there's a late claim, it's up to that department and ultimately up to the board to determine whether they were going to pay that or not, or pull that or not. So those two, his explanation was they were simply just missed.
thank you. And then 000500 for emergency clothing for $145.30. I questioned that. It was a payment. His explanation was a Sanford Center worker had asked for clothing. I pull the receipt, and there's a $129 Avenger jacket on sale for $65, some zombie t-shirts, ninja clothes, and I'm just wondering how that process works, that we have an outside agency come to juvenile detention, ask for clothing for an individual out in the community who, my understanding is, not serviced within juvenile detention, and then I don't quite understand that process, so.
Can you speak to that funding?
Dennis, could you step to the podium and explain?
Explain that funding.
The process they have two line items in there, one for household goods and institutional supplies, which I understand covers some of those items there. They also have what they call emergency services line item. That is funded by, well, partially funded by the grant they get back from the state of Iowa. They get approximately anywhere from $380,000 to $460, or $1,000, been the high. The board's allowed them to spend part of that money for that particular line item. Now, the board may choose in the future to eliminate that line item, then that eliminates the purchases. But it's kind of a open-end book there where they've allowed the juvenile detention, I believe, to go out and purchase clothing for people that are in need of clothing.
That are not serviced within juvenile detention.
That has never been stated, I don't believe.
Are you familiar with this, Mr. Grant? Yes, how that works?
With the wraparound funds?
Would you be willing to explain that?
Well, how I know it to be is the wraparound funds was put in place when we started the gang outreach program to assist some of the kids that's in need that don't have clothing. Some of the kids that we work with can't afford to buy clothing. So with those funds, we try to give kids clothing to wear to school.
So those are funds that an outreach worker would come to the head of juvenile detention and say,
and request.
These are the needs, and then the juvenile detention director would take the credit card, go to ShopGo, and purchase these different items. Is that essentially the process? Okay, thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thank you.
So, and then I just have social services. I noticed that there were 3 different late fees. One for a locksmith, one for dues membership. And my only reason for questioning these are late fees, of course, are $25 plus interest, and I'm just wondering the process of why we're incurring 3 different times late fees.
For the auditor's office perspective, when the credit cards started, it was the department should pay the credit card in full each and every month. Of course, they should have the receipts that go with that. In the event, there's a short window to make sure that those get turned in a timely manner. Normally, everything works fine and that moves forward. In the event that a department has a credit card that may miss the due date deadline, they are able to come to our office and say, we're going to miss the deadline. Can you go ahead and take this to the Board of Supervisors on Tuesday? We can do that each and every time.
Did that happen on any of these?
No, it did not.
I would like to have someone from social services, and it doesn't have to be right now unless that's the pleasure of someone from social services, but at the next meeting just address the board so that we can rectify the policy in the future. I'll vote to approve those because I don't want another late fee or more interest, but to me that's just a waste of, it's bad enough when we have them at home, so to speak, but with county money I don't.
And we do overnight those, and actually the ones that you have in front of you are due the 18th, so hopefully we get our checks processed and everything in the mail so we don't incur another late charge.
Can that be put on the agenda for next week, just an informational item? And then I received, I won't bring up the sheriff's, the car washes, but just to let you know we're an equal opportunity investigator and we received satisfactory answers, so thank you. I would move to approve the claims with the exception of 3 claim items from juvenile detention. 000100 kitchen supplies from June 11, 2014, 000300 from May 8th of 2013, and 000500 emergency clothing from December 22nd of 2014.
Second.
Discussion.
What are we going to do with those claims?
We're going to hold them until we get a better explanation from the Director of Juvenile Detention.
Okay.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Human Resources, approved memorandum of personnel transactions. I'll pass this around. Need a motion on personnel transactions.
I would move the memorandum of personnel transactions, Mr. Chair.
Need a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Thank you.
Is this going to bring reserves back up? Sheriff Drew, is this going to bring, you got a whole bunch of reserves on here?
Those are yearly. That's
Yeah.
the same number, and every year they have to be reviewed.
Oh, okay, all right. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Access to the courthouse, discussion and action.
Yes, we just set forth that, so that everyone's aware that we would give access to the north door entrance to those folks that are hourly, unless there's a job-critical need that you need to have access to one of the other doors. Good example would be anybody in transportation or anybody with the sheriff's office would need access to all doors. Then we would, and we would ask that people on an hourly basis only have that access 7 to 5 Monday through Friday. That people on a salary certainly could be here other hours. That we would grant them longer hours, probably 24/7 hours, so they can work when they still see fit. And are there any questions on that?
Is there a previous policy on this?
We had established previous policy, but what we're doing is we're bringing the function of issuing the FOBs into human resources so we can pair that with hirings and terminations and things like that. It just seems to be a more efficient way to handle it. That way there's one point.
So that we wouldn't have any out of our control, so to speak, as a county.
Absolutely. We'd have one point of access, one person that would manage those. And that way, whether it's a new person, a person that's been terminated, a person that's left for whatever reason, we would know exactly the condition of the FOB.
Need a motion?
I move to accept the FOB policy from Human Resources.
Second.
Discussion?
The question is, it says from 7 until 5.
Yes, sir.
The door is manned from what hours?
Approximately 7 to 5.
So they wouldn't be using a fob anyway.
No, in most cases they wouldn't. If we ever had a situation where we had someone who needed to be there slightly off time when the security guard was there, if the security person didn't show up until 7:05, I don't know. It is somewhat redundant, and there isn't a lot of. There really isn't a reason for an hourly person to be here other than that. But if you notice between 7 and 5, I apologize. I stuttered through that badly. I know why you need to be there from 7 to 5. The door isn't unlocked until 8.
I'm sorry.
The door is not unlocked until 8. So there are security personnel there at 7 a.m. and until 5 p.m., but the door is not unlocked until 8 o'clock. So if you come and you're here in time to punch in, as you should, before 8 o'clock, you won't be able to get in unless you follow in with someone else because the door is locked. And between 4:30 and 5, you also would need that fob. So if you needed to get back in to pick anything up that you left behind, anything like that, you would also need that fob to get back into the courthouse.
Ed, can you reiterate, we don't want hourly employees fobbing in at night and otherwise we may be violating fair labor standards and practices, is that?
Absolutely, that's correct.
So can that be reiterated when this policy goes out? Not that we don't want,
Sure.
people to be able to pick up a purse or a coat left behind, but that, extended stays, we want to make sure that we're staying within compliance.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. If we've got people in here at 6:30 in the morning or at 6:30 at night that are on an hourly basis and then not clocked in, we are in trouble with fair labor standards. So,
thanks for bringing this forward.
Do we have a motion and a second, Pat?
Yes, we do.
All those in...
Access to the courthouse.
Yes, sir.
It's supposed to be through the main entrance. Everyone is supposed to go through.
Should be through the north entrance. Yes, sir.
That's not occurring.
And that's part of the reason that we've cut off access for a number of the people. because then for those people that weren't utilizing that north access, now they'll be restricted to that. We will make exceptions for people who have a job critical need on a department by department basis to allow them to have access to other doors. Building services, an example, would need access to other doors. I know we did run a report for the door that's over by the supervisors. We found that we had 3 supervisors and 3 employees who were using that door. That access is no longer allowed for the employees, but it's certainly up to the board's pleasure if they want to restrict their own access. At this point, I have not.
The policy states that everyone comes through the north door. The judges, the elected officials, and the board is no different than anyone else. So shouldn't the fobs be deactivated if we have continual abuse of that door?
Yeah, I would say as far as the permissions that the Board of Supervisors has, that's up to a vote of the 5 of you.
Who are the 3, not to out anybody, but?
For the 3, Mr. Clausen, Mr. Ung, and Mr. Munson were the 3.
Well, I'm the only one that's here that's not.
Jack,
Okay.
you guys were fine.
And
Well, I appreciate you bringing it forward.
Yeah, and I want to correct you. The only times I've used that back door is when the courthouse is closed.
Okay, and I just pulled the report from the 29th of December until the first week of February.
Yeah,
I've
got it right here.
Okay, yes, sir.
And Mr. Ung doesn't abuse it that often, but he shouldn't be abusing it at all. Mr. Monson never goes through security. And I just think that's got to be corrected.
Point of clarification, was there a policy that was passed by the board?
Yes, there was.
Yeah, I believe we did, was it August, maybe September?
Yep.
Somewhere in that area. Do I remember it off the top of my head? No, but it was essentially that we would have access allowed 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. for hourly employees. Again, to stay outside of the Fair Labor Standards compliance.
And it did address all of the
If we vote on
courthouse
this, it'll
employees,
stay the same.
no matter what they are.
Yes, and as elected officials, who I report to directly.
Well, I understand that you're
certainly
caught,
your
you're caught in
prerogative.
the middle of this. I'm just saying if we're going to have a policy, then everybody should follow it.
Yeah, well.
And you have your right to your opinion. As I understand what you're putting forth, you will restrict hourly folks, and it will be on an as-need basis.
Yes. And we'll work with the folks from the courts to determine when they need access, but at this point, it's our intention to make it 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, and work with them for exceptions. And then I'll let you guys discuss as you see fit if we should amend that policy.
Okay.
Do we have a motion?
Yes, we do.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Rural Economic Development. No, wait a minute. County Auditor. Approve and receive for signature a liquor license application for the Anthon Golf Course in Anthon, Iowa. Need a motion? I'll move it. Need a second.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor of a liquor license say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Now, Mr. Gleiser.
David Gleiser, Director of Rural Economic Development. What is it? Item 9A. Wanted to bring some information to the attention of the board with regards to some existing policies and resolutions. The organic conversions policy, created in 2005, is supposed to, the goal of it was to increase per capita income, provide incentives for job creation, attract economic investment, and promote the health and safety of our citizens and rural property owners that convert their farmland from conventional farming practices to USDA certified organic practices. In doing a review of that policy, I find it that it's unsuccessful in reaching its goals. Since 2005, only one person in Woodbury County has applied and have been approved and participated in the program. The program is a 5-year tax rebate on the portion of farmland that is converted. How the policy is set up is that you can apply upon being approved. You get immediate tax rebates on the property that you own and convert. You must become certified by USDA by the 3rd year. So you receive tax rebates during that process. Upon the 3rd year, you need to be certified by USDA, and then you need to maintain that certification for the last 2 years in order to receive your tax rebates. Well, the one person in the county that has applied and been approved and participated was approved in 2013. That person has come forward this year informing that they're not going to be able to be in compliance. So they've paid back their tax rebates. And I've had conversations with people from the agricultural community in Woodbury County. I've spoken to the president of the County Farm Bureau and have spoken to a number of residents in the rural communities, as well as in our urban area in Sioux City. It's just something that I don't see as being an effective economic development tool. There was supposed to be up to $50,000 a year allocated into this fund to provide those tax rebates. Currently, there is $12,261 in the bucket, so to speak. I would make a recommendation to the board that we rescind that amendment or that resolution and then ask for those leftover funds to be reallocated into the Investing in Woodbury County Loan Program, which my department manages, which I have deemed as a successful or effective tool for economic development in the rural communities.
Need a motion to rescind.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
Does this motion include, you said to transfer that, to reallocate the remaining balance?
I was going to do that next. Unless you think we can put it all together.
You can if that's your motion. I'm just trying to clarify what the motion is.
That was my motion.
Okay, good. Is that your second?
That's my second.
And is this to rescind the policy or just to move the money?
To rescind the policy, Mr. Clausen, I just don't feel that it's worth setting aside dollars. It's no one's using it. I'm not seeing the level of interest that I think the county may, thought that you would receive. And this last year, one of the barriers for someone to enter into organic farming is the cost of becoming a certified producer. It's roughly about $1,000 to get that certification and go through that process. It is somewhat time consuming. It takes 3 years to get certified. And essentially what you do during that 3 years is you can't let any pesticides or herbicides touch your farmland. In the area that we live, that's hard to do with crosswinds, those sorts of things. The financial cost of getting certified has been a barrier of entry for some. In the last year's Farm Bill, there was a significant amount of money appropriated for local producers to help offset their costs. I've worked with the Iowa Department of Agriculture and have communicated this opportunity out to constituents and potential applicants, and have actually suggested to our one person that was in the program that if the cost for getting certified is an issue for you, you can use state, federal dollars from the state to pay up to 75% of those costs. This person was just not interested in doing it and said that, which would put them out of compliance because this is their 3rd year. So,
all right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. Local food purchase policy. This was a great idea. We put pressure on CBM that provides food for the jail and the juvenile detention to participate in this. It's almost impossible to do. So you want to rescind that policy. All right, need a motion. There's no money involved here.
No.
I move to rescind the local food purchase policy resolution.
Need a second?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. All right.
Just for some background history for those in the audience or maybe some of the board members, Woodbury County has a revolving loan fund. It was established in 2010 to help generate economic development opportunities for businesses in the rural areas. It provides a fixed interest rate at 2% that can be used for general secured business loans up to $200,000. Those are secured loans. Unsecured microloans up to $10,000. And originally the program was supposed to receive up to $1 million.
Did he skip C?
Pardon?
No, we're on C. In 2012, there was an amendment to the resolution for the loan program, which created another loan product. It was named the Expo Service Loans, and out of the up to $1 million that was supposed to be in the loan program, $500,000 was allocated for these Expo Service Loans. At that time, there was going to be there was a project that had potential to be located in the city of Mobile for an expo center or an equestrian center. Mobile is no longer being looked at as a site. Currently, right now, the Sioux City Council is having discussions with constituents and involved members about possibly having it here in Sioux City. With that being said, no sense of having a loan product for an expo center that's not going to be that there is no project. So I would like to see the resolution amended to eliminate expo service loans and then reappropriate the $500,000 back into general secured business loans and unsecured microloans.
Personal preference, I would say we strike this project, but I would leave that money in the local option sales tax fund, which is for economic development. If you bring a business in that wants to borrow money that's going to bring jobs, I'm all over it. I don't care where the money is. That's the stuff we need. But to earmark that money again, I think somewhat binds us.
I would move.
If you come in with some opportunity in rural Woodbury County, that's what it's all about.
I would move to rescind the resolution, but at this time, not to reallocate.
Need a second?
So I have a question. Would that then provide, then the loan program would be up to $500,000 by doing that
Correct.
motion?
Need a second?
I just want clarification
I'll
on the.
second.
Okay. I'm looking for clarification on the motion. Are we moving to reallocate the pool by $500,000, or by your affirmative answer to Mr. Gleiser, where you're saying that's a cap that could be met from out of local option sales tax?
That's not in the motion. We're not funding anything. We're simply saying this expo center that doesn't exist is not going to be referenced in the resolution.
How does it currently, what is the current policy? How is it stated?
That the Woodbury County shall provide up to $1 million in low-interest loans. And so I guess by Mr. Ung's motion, I don't have a problem with that because that proposed motion does not affect the up to $1 million. It's just eliminating the expo service loans, which then obviously would only be available for general secured business loans or unsecured microloans. But then I guess the motion would need to be to strike the pool language of $500,000 for general secured business loans, unsecured microloans.
That's correct.
What does that effect have, Dennis? Can you, sorry, last week when you were speaking, Dennis, we could never hear on the tape what you were saying.
Okay, when this was originally set up, it set up $1 million. We're gonna do it over 3 years. We did have a proposal, it's in writing there, that we're gonna fund half of it'd be $333,000, I think $333 per year, half out of gaming revenues and half out of local option. We did it the first year. The money is all over in Woodbury, invested in Woodbury County. There's approximately $236,000 left of that original first year, of which $100,000 has already been allocated out for our dental clinic in Sergeant Bluff. The next 2 years were suspended because there was not a real push. There was no interest. It wasn't getting out to the people enough that they were interested in these loans. Now there's a lot of interest in these loans, and we did suspend in year 2 and 3. Our problem now is that our gaming revenues are pretty much getting allocated out. We cannot use gaming revenues. We're going to have to use local option sales tax. So I think what I'm hearing now, you're going to cap it at pretty much at $500,000. But if it comes in with more projects, you can lift that cap even higher. So what we need to do this year, and that's really getting to the next item, is that we'd have to allocate, I believe, about $167,000 to get to the $500,000 plateau. At least you have it obligated in the fund, and then when the money is needed, we'd move the money over. That'd get them to the $500,000 cap.
Well, and I guess I didn't want to mix up these two items that I'm bringing forth because number one, I just wanted to eliminate the expo service loans. If it's the pleasure of the board to amend the amount or the pool of the entire loan program, that's okay. But I would say that right now on my desk I have working on 5 different deals close to $800,000 in askings. So
We like that.
yes, and I don't want to be in a situation where an applicant comes forward because based on the language in the resolution and what should be there, that they're going to spend $350 for an application fee only to find out that there's no money in, so to speak. So I'm bringing this forward because we need to figure out what do we have to work with in terms of this revolving loan fund program. And that's what I need, and so I can develop marketing strategies appropriately. Because if I don't have the money to loan, there's no sense of promoting the loan program. So that's kind of my predicament that I'm in right now.
Okay, if you did want to go to $1 million to fully fund it this next fiscal year, we can't do it. We have $615,000 still unallocated by the board in the local option fund for fiscal year 16. What you could do is potentially say, okay, we need $666,000 to get to the $1 million plateau. You could say give a certain dollar amount this year for next fiscal year, then on the following fiscal year, give more money there. The problem is for David is that he's got all these applications laying on a desk, and we don't have enough money to fund them all. But there maybe needs to be set down some criteria or guidelines to say what business are we interested in and how much do we relook at what their share of local option is of the total project. But we don't have enough money to fully fund it. Because you should leave some money available to the board in local option for the next 16 months, because somebody always comes in for an economic development plan such as a Vision Isle match, things like this. So you can't use it all up. You need to have some left in there. But that's up to the board, how much money you want to pump in to invest in Woodbury County, which is a valuable program.
All right, what's your pleasure?
And just, the original question was to clarify what the motion says, and that's what I'm trying to find the policy. I don't find it on.
I included it in the board packet.
In the website. But okay, so I'm just asking what the motion says. Is it to strike the expo language and change the dollar amount?
Yes.
Okay, that's what the motion is.
Is the dollar amount referring to Section A of the language of the resolution? Because it says a pool of $500,000 is established for the following classification of the loans. But at the top of the resolution, it says Woodbury County shall provide up to $1 million.
That's my question. The maker of the motion needs to.
Karen, do you have a copy of the resolution on hand?
Can we just vote on the question? If the mover of the question is willing to take a friendly amendment to strike the secured expo service loans and vote on that, and then discuss allocation of funds, is that?
I would accept.
All right, so the motion has changed?
The motion is to strike the language, the expo language, and there's a dollar amount apparently that refers to the expo.
Okay.
Right?
Everybody
Is
cool
that
with
correct?
that?
Right.
And
Okay.
are we striking the dollar amount? Is that your?
The dollar amount that refers to the expo.
I would recommend striking all of the language referencing the secured expo service loans. And then I would raise the question of, in the resolution at the top of the page, it says that Woodbury County shall provide up to $1 million in low-interest loans. And then in
My understanding is that's going to stay that way then, the million, up to $1 million. But you're taking away the expo language and the 500,000.
Yes, but in Section A, at the top of general secured business loans, see, in 2012, when the amendment was made to include or create expo service loans, they essentially divvied up the $1 million into two pools of 500,000.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying is that it should just strike the sentence above general secured business loans and strike all of the language under expo service loans. That would do it.
And that's your understanding, Ms. Strong? Okay.
All right, we all good? All those in favor say
We
aye.
don't have a second, Mr. Chair.
Pardon me?
We don't have a second.
Yes, you do.
I did.
You did? Okay.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. All right, you know what I think? I think we should, on that pool of money, have you and Mr. Butler get together and brainstorm how we're going to deal with that. If we don't have enough funds to do that, we need to get creative.
And coming before the board with this request, I know it's a hefty request for all of that funding right now. I'm fully prepared to take, as Mr. Butler suggested, 1 year of funding out of local option sales tax, and then at the $333,333, and then next year come forward with a request for that same amount. With the 5 applicants that I'm working with right now, none of them are deals where we're 100% financing all of the project. So I bring that to your attention, and none of them are any. I don't want to sound discriminatory, but they're all non-risque. There's no adult business entertainment projects. These are your downtown business, Main Street, mom and pop type deals.
All right, Dennis.
If you go with the 1 year, what that would leave, if you do the $333,333, that would still leave in your local option sales tax unallocated $281,632, which I would think would be sufficient for anything that might come up during the year.
Except he says he's got 800,000 worth of
Right.
deals on his desk, so I think we need to figure something out.
Okay.
It's either that. I mean, I guess it's going to be a first come first serve basis. I don't know.
But all
Let's
those
figure
are
something out.
potential, right? They're not all ready to present to the board, 800,000, right?
No, but they're pretty solid. I expect to start getting them through the application process within this quarter.
All right, let's.
We'll work together on it.
I would,
You want us to come back next week then?
Yes.
Okay, fair enough.
It won't affect our budget at all because the money is unallocated,
Right.
so we're fine.
I just wanted to get this information before any of the dollars are
That's
spent.
very good. Item D, let's table that. Need a motion?
Move to
The table
table.
item D, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Secondary roads. Consider award of quotation for new total station GPS equipment. Do you have money in your budget for this?
Yes, I do.
Hallelujah. Okay.
We wouldn't be asking if we didn't have the money waiting for it. Mark Nair, Woodbury County Engineer. In our budget this year, we prepared plans to specify and purchase a new total station. We received a number of bids from vendors in the state and in the area. We're recommending the purchase of the, turned out to be the lowest priced option from Transit Works, the TopCon Total Robotic Station, along with the optional equipment. What the optional equipment will allow us to do is operate a second rover, basically, that we use for collecting data on our inventory, culverts, signs, those other objects that we try to locate and tie into our geographic information system. So it was the low quote, it was a responsive quote, and serves our needs in a way that the alternatives did not.
Need a motion? I'm going to start with a second. I'll move it. Need a second.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. B.
Next, we have a permit to place overhead or buried utilities, and this is along the new Highway 20 corridor. This is for Quest, doing business as CenturyLink QC. I recommend approval of the permit.
Move it.
Need a second?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Thank you, sir. Oh, boy. All right.
3 copies for the chair's signature.
John?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, John Palolo, Director of Planning and Zoning. Brief today. Several weeks ago, Eric Henning was in here and told you about his expansion plans for his business called Campus Lofts. I think he's changed that to something else, but basically he's been operating his business about a half mile southeast of Bronson on the south side of 210th Street at about Eastland Avenue, and wishes to expand. So we've recently received a petition to rezone 7.5 acres from the adjacent property owned by a Jim and Monica Young. They've entered into a purchase agreement subject to rezoning. My goal today is to get you to refer this matter to the Woodbury County Zoning Commission for public hearing and recommendation.
Need a motion?
Move it.
Need a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Want these back, John?
No, you can toss.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Okay. Courthouse security.
The backup sheets to this are back in your actual budget packet. The budget packet was sent out before we had a change in the scheduling of this. Basically, all it is the sheriff's proposal and what we actually had, Ed had put in for courthouse security for next year. So we can go on from that, and Dave can kind of explain it here.
Morning.
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 Dave Drew, Sheriff. Major Greg Stallman behind me. Just have to have a worthy assistant. Questions?
Would you like to present your proposals?
Yes. We had been approached after the new board took over about revisiting courthouse security and a direction that the chairman was wanting us to look at. So this committee had met a number, oh boy, Larry, what, a couple years ago, and long before that. I think Mark sat on it. I think Larry sat on it over the years. And we came up with an idea, and then later it was changed and it went to the present situation. Mr. Clausen had reservations on how that should be done and wanted me to look into presenting courthouse security from the sheriff's office perspective, which we have felt all along would be the best for the county. Protection is have the sheriff's office oversee it. As I've said before, I have a great working relationship with Ed, the HR director, and I just think it's out of his scope, and I think it belongs more in the sheriff's realm. So the sheriff should oversee it. Initially, what we've always said is that we would continue to use reserves, part-time employees, similar to what Minnehaha County Sheriff's Office has done in Sioux Falls. They use retired sworn law enforcement. So our proposal is that we would use similar, that we would have reserves. We would make these people that are still here, some of those that would qualify under that, would be fall under the umbrella of the Iowa Law Enforcement Academy's Reserve Deputy Program. It's an 18-month process, but it doesn't mean that they have to stop their employment and come back in 18 months. They can go through the program. It can take up to 18 months or it can be quicker. And so that puts them under the protection of a certified reserve peace officer. That also would have them fall under our training, because we would have those people go to our training quarterly. And this would bring them up to show if something did take place, that they would be well schooled, they would be well educated and protected. And I think liability-wise that would be an interest for the county as a whole. So our proposal is that we would use a supervisor according to the contract that has been in place for years. If there's a deputy over here supervising it, he must be paid supervisory pay. So we would request that it be a sergeant, because that is in accordance with the contract of CWA. And that would require us to backfill, obviously, and hire a deputy. All that is in that proposal, and it comes under the amount that I believe is already presented, because we have said that what we liked originally was 4 training days for our correctional staff. And knowing that that may cost some money, and that maybe we could whittle that down to 2 training days, and that would lower the number and allow us to fall in place with what is already being presented for courthouse security. So those dollars would be basically a wash, and I think you get a better bang for your buck. With the sheriff's office going to the Trosper Hoyt building to do electronic monitoring, also now gives a better coverage of that building with no additional costs. We're just relocating those people to the Trosper Hoyt building, 4th floor. We'll have 1 person that will work throughout that whole building, and 2 people will be there to do some of the electronic monitoring. So we should have somebody there staffed at no additional cost either. So now we have 2 buildings, and actually all 3 buildings would be have the sheriff's office present. And I think that's the goal, and always has been probably, of the board or the sheriff, to make sure all the buildings are under the direction or safety of the sheriff. So those are some of the advantages, and when you look at the costs, I think they are within close proximity. And I know that Ed had presented a budget, I believe, for courthouse security. The only thing that I would say is that our intention is that we feel that a uniform presence is a better look, and it has a better presence. So that would, if I can find dollars in our budget, if not, we may have to ask, but that is a minimal cost. I think we can probably do that for $300 a person. So it isn't like it's a large increase, and maybe we can find it within our own. But that is, that's our proposal. We have felt all along that the public and those that are employed at the county are better served and protected by the sheriff, not taking anything away from this group or how it's run. I just feel it falls better under the sheriff, because he can provide the training, he can provide the personnel, and at times where we may not need as many, I can maybe bring some over if it's a slower day, which it hasn't been for the courts, but if it is, that would be a possibility too. So there's a lot of varieties of ways that we can do it, as long as it's budgeted there, and I think that we can make it work. And I think it might be, and I don't want to speak for Ed, but I think it might be something that he'd probably be willing to relinquish.
I think we're fine. You're leaving out one important part. How much?
Well, my other major's sick with the flu, and he had those stats, and the other administrator's sick with the flu. So I'm going off the top of my head. I think after we get rid of those 2 training days, we're around 140 something.
378. $140,378.80.
Yes.
And yours was?
Thanks, Dennis. Always need it.
What he's got proposed here with a sergeant, sworn sergeant, civilian staff, it comes to $183,778. But he's given back 2 training days. What the effect here is that the general basic will have a decrease in our shortfall of $43,400. Our general basic will have a slight increase in taxes by $34,000. We already have a $700,000 decrease in tax asking in general supplemental, so this is very insignificant. The only other cost we bring forward and carry forward is the actual operating costs, which amount to $6,650. Those are numbers that Ed put in that we just keep
Say it
those
again,
there.
156?
Operating costs, $6,650. That's for like cell phones, miscellaneous.
No. What was Ed's total?
Grand total for wages was $149,499. Operating costs were $6,650. Those operating costs would stay there. So the difference between the 149 and the 183 would have the effect of a tax asking increase in the general sup, but the revenue for the training goes back into the general basic. So it's a very insignificant change in actual dollars in reality here. So that's kind of where we're at.
Okay.
I think we're a couple months ahead of ourselves here. We've got the PERB board ruling we have not received back yet, and I think it's paramount that we have that. The budget, I like the way things are working now, Dave.
Right, I understand that.
I have not a problem with that at all. And the actual budget is $183,778, so we're spending about $40,000 more, give or take. The 2 jail training days, I was going to try and get those out of your budget anyway, so you're not giving me back anything. But things are working well. The uniform present, they are in blazers up there. If you go over to the courthouse, that's what they're in blazer, or the federal building, they're in blazers over there. And I just can't justify spending that additional monies.
I would just chime in here on the cost, because that's always come up and we've discussed this. As an observer and being on the board now, there was a lot of obvious controversy about this whole issue, and there are talks of personalities, but the actual statements from the previous board for denying your office the ability to supervise courthouse security was the cost. And I think, Supervisor Clausen, that it's fine to say you were going to cut those, but this entire board voted, I believe, 5-0 to accept the sheriff's budget. So this is
Receive it, not to accept it.
to receive it, yes. And so this is an actual cut from our existing spending right now. And so to actually come in under, 3 weeks ago, we had the same 2 proposals. One of them was over and one was under. Now I'm seeing they're both under. And the one that in my opinion, is the best case scenario, number 1, with the sworn officer, follows not only best practice, it follows the sheriff's opinion, it follows what we've heard as supervisors, and it follows what I've heard at several ISAC meetings. In fact, at the statewide supervisors meeting, we had Iowa Supreme Court Justice Katie address us on court security, which is different, but his recommendation was overwhelming that the communication be there and accessible between court security and courthouse security if it exists. And I think that there's no better way to do that than to have deputies and sworn officers in charge of this, especially given the examples that this board has brought up previously, that the way it's done now has not responded in as timely a fashion as the sheriff's office could to emergencies.
I would agree, and I really appreciate you bringing forward and coming forward with ways to even make us fiscally leaner. You understand the budget crunch that we're in, and then we have a commitment, I think, as a whole to either hold the line on property taxes, if not decrease property taxes, and yet public safety is one of our mandated services. It's not an area that I'm looking to nickel and dime, so to speak. And the preferred approach in all of my reading, not just your opinion, is the use of uniformed, trained, sworn law enforcement. And so I'm going to go ahead and move courthouse security proposal number 1 as put forward by the sheriff.
Need a second?
I would second that for clarification on, and I would ask you, Sheriff, what sort of timetable would you look at as far as?
Well, there's a couple issues. I think Larry, no disrespect, I think you may be off on that, because you had a plan that this is the plan that came up, okay? And those unions argued over it. If the sheriff takes it over, it's a whole different plan than what was in place now.
I understand this
Right.
whole scenario.
Right.
But the thing is, we went to PERB for a ruling, and we've not received it yet. So if we wait a month, I don't know what the big hurry is at all.
No, I don't have an issue on
And to look, go ahead.
Don't mind. The ruling would be due back.
Mr. Could you go?
Sure. The ruling would be due back the 22nd of March, so we're talking less than 5 weeks from PERB. The only thing really there's nothing that would prevent the sheriff from taking it over with a PERB ruling, no matter how they go. The only thing that I would see potential is not that the sheriff would have control, but who the supervisor might be. To me, that's the only issue that there would be, whether PERB received the ruling or whether it was CWA. There were 3 or 4 different points of law that were made in the hearing, so that may have a little bit of effect on how we approach it. But I really honestly don't see why the sheriff couldn't be in charge of it, and then whichever union came back as the winner in it, it could still move forward.
We really don't care, do we?
No, as I've stated before, there's a completely different set of facts that PERB would be having to rule on, so it would completely change the scope if the board's pleasure was to go ahead, which I'm moving to do, and accepting the sheriff's proposal number 1.
Well, Ed, what the PERB board is ruling on is whether it would be the deputies union or AFSCME.
Is whether it would be CWA or ASME is the point that they would be ruling on, and there are 3 or 4 points within that.
Right. So if the sheriff would take it over and put a sergeant in charge, and they would come back that it's AFSCME, would that sergeant then leave the CWA and go to the AFSCME union? Well,
Can I answer that?
yeah, you can answer it, but we haven't
I'm
got a ruling yet.
I'm not the lawyer, but I'll help you out. At least my opinion. And
Okay.
We have people that are ASME and CWA at the sheriff's office.
Right.
Under that proposal, that sergeant is under CWA. If they come back and rule something different, it doesn't matter. The sergeant that I would have is under CWA. And that's all that matters for us in that particular situation. The part-time employees, which they would be, under the reserve umbrella, I'm not sure how they can, I don't know if they can belong or not. That's a whole nother issue, because they become a reserve that is compensated. Because in the code, you can compensate reserves. But I've never known of any reserve deputies program that falls under a labor bargaining unit. And we may go on new chartered water, I'm not saying.
And, I'd love to have this discussion after we have the PERB ruling, but if we're going to have it now, let's have it.
You can't hire a sergeant real soon because this is next year's budget.
Right, this is totally up to you. What we would do is if there was a time frame you gave, 5 weeks or whatever, what we do is we would bring a sergeant off of one of those shifts, put him there, and in accordance with the CWA contract, we would pay that person that is there as a deputy, acting sergeant wages. That's how the contract reads. Until there was a list. We don't have a sergeant's list at this time. So that isn't unusual because we have a sergeant that if he works 6 days and he's off 3, a deputy will be the acting sergeant during that time. So there would be some dollars that would be involved, but they would really be minimal if you started before the budget year. What I would propose is that however that works out, we don't backfill that deputy position until July 1. That would at least help in the long run also. So I think that would be something that...
Dennis?
Right.
If the board desires to wait till the per board ruling comes back, could we at least plug in the numbers that increase to the sheriff's proposal so the numbers are there? That'd be a thought there. Then the numbers are there. After it comes back, you're still going to do what you're going to do, but at least we have the numbers in the budget to cover the expense.
I believe the motion, though, on the table right now is not to wait for the per board ruling.
But the motion on the table right now, what bothers me, Dave, this got nothing to do with the sheriff's department, so forgive me. It's the duty of the Board of Supervisors to provide courthouse security. It is not the sheriff.
I provide you with the sheriff. That is an action the board can take.
Well, I grant you that. I'm just saying you're not doing your job.
I
How
disagree.
else I can say it.
I would say...
Let me finish.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Lawson.
The other thing is we're talking about $183,000. I don't care how you cut it. The $43,000, which Dave is willing to take out of his new budget that has not been approved yet, is new dollars. It's not existing dollars.
Grant you that.
Next year, you're not going to have that, so it's automatically a $43,000 increase. So let's not sit here and talk about savings. Let's not sit here and talk about whose responsibility is, because you know there's no savings and you know it's your responsibility. So I don't understand what we're doing.
I'll explain it to you.
I would appreciate
Sure.
it, but makes sense.
I'll try my best, but the proposals on their face, without the training days, take the training days out.
Okay.
This may spend a little more money.
No, about $40,000.
Spend
more. If that's a
$40,000
little money,
more.
That's...
Right. But I believe by the end of the day, you'll see that our property taxes are going to be in a better position than they've been in a long time. We'll get to that later. Let me read verbatim. The preferred approach, this is from the National Court Security and Emergency Preparedness. This isn't Dave Drew. This isn't Mark Munson. The preferred approach is the uniformed officers training courthouse security and use of weapons. Such an approach may be 2 or 3 times more costly than the privatization route. Use of private security or contract vendors may lower security costs.
We don't have privates.
But may also pose some disadvantages. Restrictions on ability to make arrest. They have the same arrest powers that you have, Mr. Clausen. Difficulty in coordinating with local law enforcement. We've seen that. Trying to save on public safety is not the route to go. So will it cost a little more? Perhaps. Has the sheriff come forward with a good faith effort to say, here's $43,000 in offset costs? Yes, he has. But I am going to, every day of the week, vote to put public safety first and to put this in the hands of our locally elected sheriff. We are doing our job. I would submit that doing it the route that was done previously by the previous board was not. I know it's a difference of opinion, but the motion's on the table, it's seconded, and I think it's what the public wants.
I would suggest that you and Ed work through the beginning of this if we're going to do this. I don't see you going upstairs and say, guess what, folks? I think there's a transition that's going to take some time, maybe till after PERB comes through, and then we start looking at transitioning and getting into the sergeant issue and pulling one out maybe to start that process and backfill July 1, da-da-da-da-da. Make sense?
I think that sounds good. I think we can follow your suggestion without any problems.
Yeah, I
Dave
agree.
and I have always gotten along really well, so they've always been exceptionally professional through all this.
And it's gonna take a little time for them to get uniforms. You know, that's something that takes a few weeks itself, so you would probably be at that 5-week per board ruling. And, you know, at that point, but I would point out, it's $34,000 is the difference. But we did cut those things, and I know, Larry, you wanted to cut. And when you want to cut, you got to think before you want to cut. Okay, and I just want to share this because I've mentioned to Ed, all jails, and I believe juvenile detention facilities, are going to fall under PREA. PREA's Prison Rape Elimination Act, and I sent you that information.
I've got that.
And that is very important. And we are required to have training. We also have a linear jail. And because it's not directed supervision, we have to be within earshot of someone. That poses issues. But training cannot just, I think there's been a past practice that we're cutting for cutting reasons. But I think what I like, and nothing personal, but I want people to at least listen and hear what I have to say. Don't always have to agree, and you know, you and I have probably disagreed more than agreed. But you have to understand that I'm not here asking for things just because I'm trying to build a kingdom. I'm here to make sure that our sheriff's office people are safe, but the county is not going to end up spending dollars in court for liability issues. And when we talk about courthouse security, my feeling is untrained people. I believe you have some people here that are hired under the HR director that maybe the last time they qualified on a range was several years ago when they left their employment. That's not acceptable. And
No, but that's easily correctable.
Yeah, but it's gone on. You've been under this direction since September. If they, God forbid, got into something, and you know lawyers are going to say, can I see your training records? And if that's at 1996, we're going to have issues. But when you're falling under the sheriff's direction, you don't have those issues because they're going to get quarterly training, which we provide already at no cost, except for the jail. Now we're trying to bring them into play also. But that's the pluses of this program, having the sheriff oversee it. Thank you.
All right, but Dave, you do understand where I'm coming from. Where you talk about training, you had $83,000 in there that had never been in there before.
Right.
Now you're saying I'll give you $43,000 back to take away from this. So there goes the training down the drain.
We would have it twice a year, and we were going to try to do it quarterly like our patrol.
I understand
and now
that.
we'll do it every 6 months. But it's imperative that we do it. Because Larry, all we had before was $5,000 for 63 employees. Popping in a video and saying, watch this, is really flirting with deliberate indifference.
But that's the sheriff's call. That's not the board's call.
You're the one that holds the purse strings.
Right. Yeah,
And if I don't get the money, I don't get a train.
Right, but you've never asked for it before.
Oh.
All right, I think we need to move on. All right, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Okay, here we go. We need to adjourn this meeting.
Recess.
Excuse me.
One more addition to this motion, you should have, or have another motion where we decrease the training at 43,400 in general basic and increase the budget and general supplemental by 34,230.
Can we do that in the budget hearing?
That in part, it's all related to courthouse security, so you could probably do
Okay.
it now.
Need a motion?
Yep.
Move it.
Second?
Second?
Pat, you got all that?
I'll get it from Mr. Butler.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
All right, adjourning this meeting and going into the Orton.
Recess. You're just recessing this meeting.
Recess this meeting, it says adjourn. And we're going into the Orton Slough Drainage District meeting to consider approval of the work authorization for INS Group for the Orton Slough Maintenance Project. Is Mr. Yocum happy with this?
I believe he is, yes.
Yes.
Especially since we're saving them some money on the cost of this with dealing with a company that has a history with the Orton Slough. Mark Mayer, Woodbury County Engineer, and this is a follow-up to the board's award of work to be done on the Orton Slough to identify areas needing repair and prepare a set of plans for letting to allow maintenance to be done on the drainage district. This is for a lump sum project fee of $2,500 and requires authorization of the chair of the Orton Slough Drainage District trustees.
Okay, we being the trustees.
Being the trustees and you being the chair of that body. So.
Need a motion to approve the recommendation.
So move, Mr. Chair.
Need a second?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Okay. Need a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Move to adjourn.
I'll second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. We are back into Woodbury County Board meeting. Item number 14. Mr. Butler.
Okay, I believe the first item on the agenda was,
Purchase of a lawnmower.
oh, the lawnmower, okay. Okay, the decision of the board was to go on public bidder fund, take out the $9,500 for maintenance of lots. And so doing that, we're gonna have our courthouse building maintenance take care of these lots. They have been willing and offered to do that through conversations with them. But in that process, they're gonna need some mowers, they're gonna need some trimmers, weed clippers, whatever they need to maintain those lots. So we do not have exact dollar amount, but all we're asking to do is go out to bid and get some numbers for purchasing of a lawnmower. The best lawnmower you can buy usually is a zero turn radius, which they can whip out these yards pretty fast. They'll need some trimmers and things like that, but they can look around and see if there's a used one or a new one. They're a little expensive, but I would suggest when we get them, we pay this out of the money left over, whatever we have left over this year, and public bidder on the maintenance of the lawns, and also combine some gaming revenues with that.
So you need a motion on that?
Yes.
Need a motion.
I guess the motion be to pursue the purchase of the lawnmower and the related equipment to fulfill their responsibilities.
Which they'll bring back.
Yes.
Okay. I'll move it. Need a second.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay.
Nay.
Update and discussion on finish line fleet and quantity purchasing.
Okay, on Finish Line Fleet, we did present this at the department heads meeting. Everybody agreed to it. Some are actually already on it. There are some that aren't on any type of system. But what we're proposing here is to ask elected officials to go on this system of fleet line or Finish Line Fleet and go with the process of doing that. Elected officials cannot be forced because they're autonomous, but I think there's only one elected official has a county vehicles, and he's more than willing to go on this. And then the department heads, we just require them to pursue this type of system here. Some may be on a system now that's fairly close to it, such as the county engineer, I think, has a different system, but if it's an improvement to what he has, he's willing to make the change, I believe. I don't know if he's still here or not. Yes. Oh, there you are.
Within the areas we can where we don't have fuel storage on site, which we do at most of our sheds where we don't have, excuse me.
Since we don't have fueling stations in all the towns in which we have sheds, we'll have a number of those that will maintain their on-site fueling facilities. Those are registered and appropriately inspected and kept up to good standard with the fire marshal's office or the DNR for the underground ones. But our Mobile District 2 shed, the pickup trucks could be easily fueled through this program, as could all of our engineering vehicles. So this is very similar to the program that we're already on with Wright Express.
So driving a motor grader 15 miles to use this credit card is probably not a functional idea.
I would say that's rather impractical, and we would just as soon avoid doing that if possible.
So your proposal here is that you and Ed and Pat probably needs to be involved, would work with each of the department heads to get them on?
Yes.
Okay.
We have a number, toll-free number. Her name's Tina, down on the Arkansas border, that actually corresponds with us, and she gets it done rather efficiently.
And what do we save?
We'll save on the federal tax, just in the sheriff's office alone. They're already using it. To give you examples, about $11,000 just in the sheriff's office. They are presently doing it, but now we're including all vehicles. And then,
So like if a department has one car, they're probably not getting the 18.5 cents back per gallon.
Correct.
Just for the record, we regularly apply for those through our department.
That's because you use a lot of fuel.
We use a lot of fuel, yes. At $600,000 plus per year, we try and get back every penny we can.
This will put everybody in the position of getting that back.
Yes.
Okay. Need a motion? I'll move it. Need a second.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. I'm torn here. I'm going to put reports to the end.
You want to do quantity purchasing also?
Pardon me?
Quantity purchasing?
You want to talk about that?
Yes. And what I would like is some direction from the board to instruct building services to go out to bid after they get 2 items. First, our garbage collection. Every department's using it. Get that gathered together. They have a form to fill out that Mark wrote up there, fits in very well. Fill that out, return to building services, then we can put it together and have the county attorney help us write out bid specs on it and bid it out. It'll be a sealed bid process on the garbage and also on custodial supplies, things like that. All the departments submit to building services some type of information of quantities they need, then we can lump it together, and then we'll bid that out too as one lump bid. The services still go and be in their individual departments, but we might get a cheaper price at it, which we're hoping that's what happens.
I have to raise the question of purchasing bulk copy machine paper, because everybody's buying their own. If there was a way that we could figure out how much we use a year and confront them with a bulk amount of stuff.
Now,
and then kind of the same way, if we have a vendor that's up to doing that, then they haul it out to Mobile when he needs it and bill him.
Go ahead.
Here I go again.
You use a different kind of paper.
We do use a different type of paper because some of our materials are archival, where we're using a higher quality paper, particularly for our plan sets with the 11 by 17 we have. Those are designed with higher quality, low acid paper that not only takes the toner better, gives better line quality, but it also allows those plans to not age and deteriorate.
But I bet every paper company could provide it.
Every paper company might be able to, and as long as we could use our specification and then it be bid along with the rest where we might be able to take advantage, that would be okay in my book.
Yeah.
But I just want to be sure that we don't try to use the less costly copier papers just to save money and then have those records falling apart or deteriorating.
Which raises the question, we're going to have to get quality of paper.
Yeah. Yes. And
because they could bid a really cheap paper.
Yes.
And for a lot of things, a really cheap paper would work when somebody wants a copy of a record, we can just give them
although it is a little impractical to go switching paper through the copier on occasion.
Yeah.
But there are things that, and I think the recorder's office might have some of the same issues where
Right.
I just wanted to make
Yikes.
sure there was awareness of that here.
Okay, so you need consensus to move forward.
Yes, and one more item, I just thought about while I'm standing here, I'm trying to
Wait a
think
minute.
of something.
Is everybody up for them moving forward with looking at this stuff in quantity?
It's a good idea.
Could we talk with the city? Because they buy a lot of copy paper, they probably buy the same paper for their engineering department as possibly our engineering department. Could we explore the possibility of doing joint purchasing with them on bulk copy paper? The city of Sioux City.
Absolutely.
And when you're
I
buying,
thought we already piggybacked on our orders with that they've.
no, we
they
are
put it
not
out.
presently that I'm aware of. But this is something we could bulk order, and if you get, instead of 500 cases, you're ordering 2,000 cases of the bulk, you probably get a cheaper price. But something at least explore with the city, see if we could work it out with them on the bulk issue on paper.
Go for it. Do we need a motion?
No, I think it's just everybody's up to it. It comes back to us before it happens.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks, sir.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I suggest we jump 15, 16, and 17, and if there's still energy, we'll bring them back up at the end. Budget discussion, 2016. Update on tax askings tax rate. Mr. Taylor.
Karen is going to put up a little bit of a PowerPoint. We have some copies. Dennis helped me to prepare this, so there's copies for the media and anyone else who is interested. So this is understanding the tax structure and goals and the budget process and some transparency and clarity for taxpayers. Key goal of the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors is to keep tax rates on all residents at or below the current level. And I know a current frustration of taxpayers is when elected officials claim to have held the line on property taxes, and yet they see their taxes actually go up. And simply put, that's because you have valuation times the tax rate, which equals the total tax askings, or the dollars that are generated by the tax. And so I give an example on this next slide where you have an effective property tax increase, even with a slightly less tax rate, because sometimes a home will be reassessed at more value, so taxes go up. So for example, if a homeowner sees a 1.5% reduction in a certain levy rate, but then a 4% increase in the assessed value of her home because of the reassessment, essentially the property tax bill is even more than when that homeowner is writing the check. I believe this will be a pivotal policy discussion, and then in future years with CF Industries revenue, because if we simply keep the rates the same in 2018 and beyond, county government will continue to grow. And so this year will set a precedence for the practice of prioritizing the property taxpayer. And there's a couple of different ways you can look at what holding the line means. You can look at the tax askings and the tax rate. Because even without increased valuation, if we levied at the same rate across all funds, and I'm talking general basic, general supplemental, rural basic, when there's increased new growth, that results in more tax askings, or the total generated revenue to county government. By statute, we levy at $3.50 per thousand in general basic and have no desire to exceed the cap nor increase other rates. But in fact, we can decrease other rates such as general supplemental and rural basic to lower effectively the overall tax rate. So here's what I'd like to suggest or submit as a goal. So 1 year goal to decrease the tax rate and askings. And that's a challenge, right? When wages and the CPI and other costs increase. And so it's going to take some smart planning, prioritization of needs versus wants, and cooperation on the part of all elected officials and department heads. And guess what? In Woodbury County, we have that. I believe that this week, our elected officials and department heads have done yeoman's work and done great things, and you'll see that through our budgeting process, where they've come to us where the sheriff has said, maybe I could do this, or where we have Veterans Affairs saying, well, I could reduce in this area. They've come to us on that when we've given some proposals. So we've begun several strategies for getting to the point where this can be a reality for the FY 2016 budget. Some of that has been shifting in funds that we could only use for certain allocated purposes that make more sense. Some of it has been in a document that we've given 50% year-to-date cuts. I believe we can commit to holding and decreasing tax rates in future years, and for the first time in decades, actually ask less of Woodbury County taxpayers, while we also look for future growth and revenue. That will be from things like the county attorney payment program or the 24/7 program, CF Industries and Economic Development, which David Gleiser is helping to lead. Here's where we're at. In general basic, we started, and you heard this in the media, right, with $919,502 in general basic expenditures over revenues. We are down to $537,161 of work left to do. Dennis has that tally sheet. Our goal is to get to zero. Zero in general basic. We've seen great cooperation so far on behalf of department heads and elected officials regarding the FY15 items that haven't been expended yet at 50% year to date, 6 months in, which raises the question if some line items are over budgeted. Sometimes they've come back to us and they said, well, you don't understand. We make an end of the year purchase on ammunition or office supplies or things of that nature. Understood. But it's having that conversation back and forth in communication. But know this, even if we get general basic down to zero, that's not the only fund, and you have to understand the following. In general supplemental, we have decreased the total tax askings by $778,956. With debt service, mental health services, and general supplemental, here are the current totals, and I put FY 2015 next to FY 2016. These numbers are up to date in real time as of right now. And the difference is $374,838 less in tax askings than in the prior fiscal year, which is a reduction of about 1.19%. And what I would do is challenge us to find other governments at this point that are able to ask less in total in tax askings. And we have more work, as I stated, set to do. But my conclusion is this, and that you will see this very clearly. You'll see it not only in the tax rate, but in making up for, even with increased valuation, as far as the Woodbury County taxpayers' tax bills, the good news is they're going down. And that's what I wanted to present, and I believe that Dennis can answer any questions as far as specifics, but that's where we're at right now, and I think we have exciting things in store as we go through the rest of our budgeting process, where we're going to make sizable, significant, and responsible reductions.
Is there going to be a quiz on this?
No, not forthcoming.
All right. Equipment Replacement Fund, Dennis.
What I have presented to you now we are following the budget work papers here, and they go right in order of the agenda with the exception of courthouse security. We've already done that. So with the Equipment Replacement Fund, we're showing here a 5-year plan of what the actual office has requested to the best of our knowledge to the presence. Now when you get down to 18, 19, 20, yes, those will probably change, but at least gives a snapshot of what people are asking for. And then we also, on the right half of the paper on the 5-year replacement plan, we're showing how they are funded, either through bonds, federal grants, conservation reserve, or gaming revenues. So in the year we're in right now, you can see we're asking for $179,250. We are funding that all through gaming revenues. And this is just one area. We're going to talk about another area, gaming revenues, here in a little bit. But for the time being, this has been plugged into our budgets. Been plugged in, taking it out of the gaming revenues. But this is just a snapshot. It shows what departments are asking and what they're asking for. Now, this will change every year. It all depends on the availability of gaming revenues also, as we'll talk about a little bit further here. But if our goal is for gaming revenues, the gaming Hard Rock to generate 72 million a year, then we can generate 360,000. If it goes down a little bit, it'll affect us. If it goes up a little bit, that'll affect us also. But that's our goal.
What is the total amount that you're at, that is being proposed to?
179,250. And I've already plugged that into the gaming revenue allocations over to here. In the future, what we may do, as we talk a little bit later here, is instead of pulling these out of people's budgets, we're going to leave them in their budgets and still fund it with gaming revenues potentially. And that does help reduce tax asking on our shortfalls. And then the only reason we'd use the equipment replacement plan fund is like a sinking fund. We did that for the zoning officers, new vehicle, where we put so much for 3 years away, and then when we had it build up, we bought it instead of having to hit one time. Another good place to use that is replacement of our computer systems. Every 5 years, it was 3 years, I think it's gone to 5, and John could correct me if not, that we could put money away so much a year in the sinking fund out of gaming revenues or any other funds the board like to purchase this, and then all of a sudden we don't have to come up with 400,000, we have the money build up. The same way it could be for voting machines also, but that's in our CIP. So if we shift that over equipment replacement, we'd have to do a little shift there, but that's not a problem.
So item C is 179,350?
250.
250?
Sorry.
What does that bring us down to?
That will bring us down in our gaming revenue to funds available of 393,066, which we'll be addressing here in the next couple items.
Okay. All right, we need a motion to receive.
Well, I would move all line items involving office equipment. Is that where we're at?
Yep.
No, now we're on C. Okay, this is a little different here.
Oh, wait a minute. So what's up?
All
What's
we're
B?
approving now in B is what we were going to transfer the 179,000. And that transfer there will be affected a little bit as we do line item reductions further down the line. That affected by 6,850, but that's all adjusting numbers there. But the max would be 185,775. We would actually move that money in as we spend it. So if we don't spend it, the money stays in gaming revenues.
Okay.
If we spend it all, what's the total dollar value
185,775.
in the balance?
Oh, and the balance in your local option?
No.
No?
I mean, in your riverboat gaming monies, I mean. Okay, that'd reduce it down to about 213,000.
Okay.
That'd still be left at the discretion of the board, and there's another item or two may affect that even yet. So as we go through here, but that item there would reduce the 393 by 185,000.
All right, need a motion on item C.
I would move to fund all line items involving office equipment, motor vehicles, and furniture in the general basic fund using gaming revenues and the aforementioned amount.
Second.
Discussion?
Just one more thought is potentially, and it's something that is judged every year, how much gaming revenues we have. We may be able to do this again, or we may not be able to do this again, but I just want to preface, as we go along, it'll be dependent on future revenues. But that's another issue when we do the next budget cycle.
But just so everyone's clear, these are not technically ongoing expenses in the sense that they're equipment replacement.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you.
All right.
That will reduce our shortfall in the general basic by 185,775.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay.
Nay.
Okay, gaming reserves fund. Did we just do that?
In that particular item here, we're actually approving the whole list I have included as obligations. This is our original replacement snow cap. We pay for that every year out of gaming revenues. And then our emergency vehicle for EMA, Siouxland Regional Transit, Meals and Wheels, and Council on Sexual Assault, which are all part of matching grants for their leverage for additional funds. So when you come all down, that's 255,000 total. Basically, you have done this already through various times of the budget process.
All right, so that brings the total down to what?
We are down to approximately 208,000 left in gaming revenues.
Okay. Need a motion? To receive.
Move to receive, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay.
Nay.
All right. Thank you, Dennis.
Yep.
Discussion and action on gang prevention services using gaming revenues. Hearing no one.
Jim Rexner, 114 Midville Avenue. Since it's back on the agenda, I'll just rise to support it again. But I do have to say, Mr. Taylor's explanation on what you're all doing in terms of property tax was very good. It's probably the best expression of the dilemmas school board, city, and county face. So I congratulate you on it. I don't agree with how you're going about it, but I congratulate you on comprehending this in a fashion that ultimately makes a huge difference to Woodbury County taxpayers. So thank you. However, I am here to suggest you continue funding the gang prevention program. I said what I said last week. I'll say it one more time. I understand the process you're all going through, but since you have an obligation and a mandate to maintain juvenile detention, to me, it's money well spent to prevent gang activity. I'm not here to talk about the apocalypse. There isn't going to be 100 people joining gangs tomorrow morning or next week. But without the gang prevention program, there will be more juveniles in juvenile detention. I mean, that association I find very clear and very direct. So I would suggest, since you have the gaming money, and if I understand correctly, you have enough gaming money left over to actually continue this program for one more year. So I would suggest that you do that. I would ask that you would do it, and appreciate you listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Anyone else?
Ryan Dowelbaum, pastor of First Congregational Church here in Sioux City. I'd also like to speak in favor of using these gaming monies for Sanford Center. As a private citizen, I sympathize with the cause of small government. At the same time, I think by anyone's estimation, the maintenance of public safety and preservation of law and order are government's job. You yourself said, Mr. Taylor, not long ago, that any day of the week you will vote to uphold public safety. And I think it's clear that preventative services are more cost-effective than incarceration. And I think, frankly, as has been suggested, that churches simply fill in the gap is unrealistic. Our congregation, as well as having a long-standing relationship with the Sanford Center, also picks up trash on the side of the highway. I think it makes about as much sense to say, well, you know, churches are doing some of this, so let's have churches be responsible for the maintenance of roads and bridges, and then when the bridge collapses, then the county will come in and solve that problem. But obviously, that's ludicrous. So in conclusion, I would suggest that you not abdicate your responsibility to preserving law and order using the preventative services at our disposal. Thanks.
Thank you. Dr. Owens.
Dick Owens, 3001 Malloy Road, Sioux City, Iowa. First thing, I want you to know I'm not speaking in behalf of the Sanford Center. I'm speaking in behalf of Dick Owens. First thing, I want to thank those of you in the majority that voted for the $70-some thousand to come to the Sanford Center. It's absolutely needed. We took almost all the surplus money we had from other programs to keep a program going, which we believe is a county responsibility. Now, the persons that did not vote for this, I assume there were several reasons, but I keep hearing this comment about Our policy is to only fund those things which are mandated. I want to talk about mandation. When you look at only funding things that are mandated, you better look at what mandated means. At the federal level and the state level, what it says is there are things that are critical to the nation, and there are things that are critical to the state. And those things are critical, and they need to be continuous funded, and they should be funded by all taxpayers. And there should be longevity to the money coming in. When you only look at mandated services, you are not looking at the needs of a county. That's another level. Same thing in the city. You look at the needs of the city. When you look and say our policy is mandated services, basically all you're saying is community, we're going to follow the law. You have not looked at specific needs. Now, I think in 1992, and I was very active in 1992, but I was not active in this particular situation. The people that came together and looked at, and I'm going to use Jeremy's word because I agree with that, they looked at public safety. And what did they see? They saw schools, kids coming with guns. They saw not just Sioux City, but they saw gang activity moving into the other areas, because there's two things in gang activity. Number one, they have roots, and they move out. They recruit. The second thing is they need money, and there is a high correlation. The higher the gang that's going on, the greater the drug problem. At that time, Sioux City had a system, and most of the system, they had the mental health systems going on, and they also had systems, what I call suppression. The typical thing we do with gangs is suppress. That's why you have probation. That's why you have detention. That's why you have prisons. What was happening in Sioux City was the gang, because there was not a method to slow the numbers coming in, increased and increased to the place that suppression would not control it. Those people then looked at the concept of the need of the county, and they saw it as a county need. They did not see it necessarily Sioux City, even though Sioux City had the bigger problems. And the reason it is a county need is that gangs were going out, immediately attracting students, and they also knew that every taxpayer in Woodbury County was paying extra dollars because of more people going into detention, people going into prison. Every taxpayer is involved with this. They made a decision, and it's very important that we understand that. They asked the Sanford Center to be a part of that system. That system was to prevent more people coming in, and we will continue to have the suppression system. They brought that into a system that was already performing well, but the number of people coming in absolutely had taken over the system. What then happened, 25 years, supervisors saw this as a county problem, and they supported it. And it was effective because we did not see the stuff in the paper we saw in 1992. Those supervisors were not wild spenders. I would suggest everybody in this room look at the financial stability of this county and compare it with any county in Iowa of the same size. We are 3 to 5 times better. They're not even close. So the history of this, the supervisors coming in, has been a very positive thing. So here's where we are today. You are asking whether, I don't know if you believe this is even a problem. That's your personal belief. But you're saying to Sanford Center, and I believe it is a county problem, but you're saying to Sanford Center now, you're not only to deliver the service, you got to go out and find the money to deliver the service. You are not asking the equalization across the county. What you're also going to, Sanford Center is going to have to do is go out and now, not because we've given this a shared dollar across the county, We're going to have to go out to agencies and individuals and ask for money. It's a county problem, but we're going to ask for money from those people that probably feel a little stronger about what we need in the community. The issue that we have not looked at is time. Mandate, think of mandate services. The reason you go to the county to get the money is the longevity of the money. We are only talking 1 year, but gangs don't go away. These problems are going to be here 5 years down the road. They're going to be here 10 years down the road. And then what's going to happen? How long are you going to expect Sanford Center to not only deliver the service, but to get the money? How long are you going to expect people to continue to support the kind of dollars that's going to take to run this? That's the issue today. And we're going to ask for a few more dollars. One last thing, and then I'm going to sit down. I've heard, I don't know how many times, that other counties are not doing, they don't support nonprofits. I've heard that I don't know how many times. I don't believe that's true. I think as you think of your policy to fund nonprofits, I think you have done well, and at least you have got one policy, and I support it. That policy is that if there's an agency or a nonprofit that can bring in additional dollars, we pay max funds. I agree with that. I think it's great. I hope you don't change it. But I think the next step you've got to start thinking about, what about nonprofits that decrease money? When you look at the Sanford Center and the program and the system, the mental health and probation and the suppression, every taxpayer in this county has saved a tremendous amount of dollars because of what has taken place. It's just equally important to look at how we save dollars as it is to give to other organizations bring in dollars. So I'm asking you today to start thinking in your policy. The second thing I think you should look at is what are other counties doing. I think you're going to be very surprised. I think if you look at Plymouth County, you look at Sioux County, I don't know about Cherokee, I think you're going to see that they have a way to support nonprofits. And then I think you need to look at the counties that have gaming. I have friends in several counties where that's happening, and the number of dollars those counties are giving to nonprofits is amazing. So this thing is not ended. I don't know where we're going to do if we get a vote for some more money, but it's not ended, people. It's not going to go away. The situation we're talking about will be here 20 years from now. And I think somewhere along the line, we are going to have to begin to truly understand this is a county problem. It is not Sanford Center's problem. We're going to try to do everything we can, but sometime down the road, the energy's not going to be there. Sometime down the road, the people that are going to support us probably the next 2 or 3 years are not going to have the same desire to do it. That problem's going to come back. So I certainly hope that as you look at nonprofits and you look at your policies, you really begin to look at the real world. And the real world is that this county needs a gang prevention program, and every person in this county should be held accountable to assist us, just like a mandate that comes down from the state or the federal government. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick.
Well said, Mr. Owens.
You know, I couldn't leave without saying something. 804 South Baxton. You know, we talk about this gang outreach problem. It's everybody's problem. You know, when we started this program some 22 years ago, believe it or not, we had over 35 organized gangs here in Sioux City, Iowa. The numbers range from 800 to 1,000 gang members right here in Sioux City, Iowa. Today, we probably got 3 to 5 organized gangs in this city. We need to continue to treat this problem. Just the other day, I was on the north side of town. As I traveled through the neighborhoods to pick up kids, I came across some gang graffiti on the wall. West Side Locals, F the police. They're telling me that they're still here. And they're getting ready to re-up. That's what they're telling me. I can remember going into schools where kids wasn't safe for them to be in those schools. Any of you guys have kids, grandkids? When you think about money, when someone brings a gun to school, talk about shooting somebody, would you think about money, or would you rather have somebody like me to deal with those kids? This is a problem in Sioux City, Iowa. How I know? Because I've been in the streets. Nobody have to tell me about it. I've been there. I've worked with a lot of these kids. It's not a problem until they start shooting kids again. It's a problem now. Go up to North Omaha. They thought the same thing. It wasn't a problem. And they're killing kids left and right. Do we want that to happen right here in Sioux City, Iowa? Do we want that to happen? What is it going to take for me to stand over a casket of a young man or a young girl to say, we could have did something, but we didn't do it? I'm going to ask you again. Don't do the popular thing. Do the right thing. Do the right thing. I sit and I look at my brothers. You mentioned you're a Christian. I'm a believer. God has called us to take care of the needy. We got some young people in Sioux City, Iowa that's in need. You're my brothers. The second greatest commandment that he gave us is to love your brother like you love yourself. I'm asking you guys today to love Sanford Center, to love the kids in which we work with, to help them. To help them. Please. I'm not begging, I'm just asking. But we need this in this town. I've traveled all over the Midwest. I've taken kids to North Omaha to show them that you don't need to do this. You don't need to be a part of gangs. I've taken kids to different parts where at night you can hear the gunshots. We don't get to hear that in Sioux City. Why? Because we got a program in place that keeps it out of Sioux City. Why are we going to do away with the program and allow this gang to take hold of this city? You know, people told me a long time ago that Sioux City, Woodbury County, was a great place to live. And I thought that I would invest in that. It wasn't mandated for me to give my life, but I did. I did. And I will continue to still fight this fight. The gangs are a cancer in this community. They're still here. And if we don't do something about it, when it comes back, it's going to be trouble. I know, because I'm out there. I talk to those kids day in and day out. I know what's happening in the city. And another thing, I want to encourage everyone that's on the board, come over there and talk to us and see what we're doing. Spend some time with us. Don't drop assumptions on the things that you read in the paper. Come and talk to us. Let us explain for ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Fitz. Okay, we need a motion.
Well, I agree with everything that's been said out here. If we don't fund gang prevention, we're just going to be funding incarceration. We've got a juvenile detention center that Mr. Butler's got $450,000 programmed as revenue. If we lose gang prevention, you're going to lose the bulk of that revenue because we're going to fill the juvenile detention center with Woodbury County residents. This is something that's worked, it's worked well. I would move we fund it out of riverboat funds.
Can I say just a few words? I promised myself I wouldn't. But hearing Fitz talk and hearing some of the speakers from last week, having been one of those individuals that grew up in North Omaha and watched the gang scene come in. Thankfully, I was only there for the last few years of my high school, but they were coming in. And the community saw them coming in, but they chose to ignore it. And they chose to ignore it because it was just on North Omaha. They didn't think it would spread around. They didn't even think it would take hold. But it did. I also grew up with my summers in Denver, in the suburbs of Aurora, during my college years. That community also saw it coming, and they chose to ignore it. I was growing up in Montbello. The next year, I couldn't go to Montbello. I was in Aurora. The next year, there was parts of Aurora that I couldn't go to. It wasn't just Metro Denver. I'm asking you not to necessarily fund the Sanford Center, but to fund the gang prevention. A couple things we can do that will probably solve some of the issues that were discussed before is not going to be coming from property tax dollars. I know that was an issue. This would be gaming revenue. The other thing is, with the RFP, we can structure it any way we want to. You can, again, choose to fund it at a certain level. You can put in there stipulations that says, whoever you choose to fund, whether it be the Sanford Center or someone else, has to reach a certain goal of fundraising on their own, and we will match that. Or you can just choose to fund a certain level and put in some expectations, which you should do anyway. I don't think we had really an oversight on what those expectations were for that center, Sanford Center, that did the prevention in the past. But I don't think anybody here is willing to say gang prevention is not a necessity for this community. I don't think anybody's going to say that. So with that in mind, I would say we do have a responsibility to this community. We do have an opportunity to fund this gang prevention because it's in this community. It's not going to go away. Law enforcement can only do so much. Yes, we can incarcerate them all we want to, but I think if you look at the cities, incarceration isn't going to solve the problem. It's still there. You need people like the Fitzgerald Grants that can get and reach these children because we need to reach them early. If you wait until they're in high school, college, it's too late. It will be there. And in fact, if you know the gang environment, they want to go to jail. They want to go to prison because that's how they get their notoriety. And if we wait that late, it's over. Thank you.
Thank you. I will second Mr. Clausen's motion. I'm having a real hard time with the concept that the county is the only one in the world that will make this happen. Where is Juvenile Court Services? Where is DHS? Where's Sioux City Schools? Come on. You're telling us that we are the only ones in the world that can do this. No one else should even be talked to. I can't buy it. I can't do it.
Can I say something? Believe it or not, misconception about Sioux City Schools. They do fund our program. They put us in the school. They put us in the school. They place us in offices, so therefore we don't have to pay for that. They allow us to come and work within their school, and that's the trade-off. So they are putting in. DHS at one time, Juvenile Court Services, they did put in dollars into our programs. For whatever reason, those dollars has dried up. So that's a misconception. Everybody has been putting in. The dollars just started going away. And we need those revenues to help these kids. That's what we need. You know, we've been out there banging the pavement for fundraisers. You know, I do United Way presentation, over 15 of them a year to raise dollars. We've been out there working. But when we sit back and we ask a certain group of people just to fund 60 nonprofits, then guess what happens? Their plate begin to spread real, real thin. And there's nothing else to give out to nobody. And that's how we see it. I've been asking people. I'm one of those ones that actually got out on the streets when the funding was cut to help raise funds. Very little has come in. Very little has come in.
Thanks, Fitz.
You know, Mark, sometimes we don't agree, but I honestly agree with that. What the Sanford Center will be doing, and the reason we need at least some money for another year, we will put together a way to look at bringing groups together, and we'll put on the table the total needs of this situation. Whether we can form partnerships, I don't know, but it's going to take some time because this is new. Once we get that together, then we will be ready to do a fundraising. And the fundraising is always, everybody can talk. I've done hundreds of fundraising. I know how to do fundraising. But I can tell you this will be a different way. Because if you bring in new partners, and let's say they only come in at 10,000, the next thing you have to put together then is not only, if you bring in partners, you look at the present problem, but you look at where the gaps are. I can tell you, I don't know if you can raise the money, I can show you how you can save $1 million. But you can't do it and this goes away. You give us some time, we will have something ready to go probably by October. And if people don't want to come in, meaning these other ones that you're talking about, we will go without them. But we will do a job, and we will bring in some money, and we will create a program that you can be proud of. But you cannot change immediately in 3 months, 4 months, the relationships that has been going on. If there's one good thing that's coming out of this, is that all of us have got to come to a different level. And I'm ready to do that. And I think the Sanford Center is ready to do that. But you cannot maintain a staff without having long time terms. And that money is not going to begin to flow right away. Because if you looked at fundraising and you look at partnerships and so forth, we can't do it right now because everybody is trying to do their own budgets. And everybody is just exactly the way you guys are. That's not a new, that happens every year. I don't care where you come. Once that's over, and I'm talking probably April or May, we will then be ready to start looking at how we're going to bring this thing together. And money will start flowing, my thinking is, probably in October, November. I wish it was earlier. But you're not just going to go out. We can go out and start knocking on doors and we'll get money. You know, you read in the paper, we got a check for $6,000. And we really appreciate that. But that's not the solution. We have got to have time to put together a new way to look at this and to fund it. And that's why we're here today. And once you get it, I can assure you that you will see some things happening. And whether it will be at the level I want it to be, it may not be there. But there will be a change. And it will be positive. And it will continue to decrease the number of people that are going in and hope to be, want to be, or really are gang members. I still see it as a county problem. But I know that we'll move forward. And good things will happen. But we have to have some additional money so that we can keep the present level until we start new money coming in.
Call a roll.
Ung?
Nay.
Clausen?
Aye.
Monson?
Nay.
Taylor?
Nay.
Okay, next item. Emergency services budget and emergency services allocation. I'm not sure I understand the difference between the two.
Mr. Chairman, last week the board delayed consideration of the EMS budget. I'd been asked to come up with something and limit it to one page, which I provided in all of our packets. regarding a budget proposal, as well as some separate recommendations as to how the money will be spent in order to more soundly comply with what the rural mayors would like to see from EMS, and gathering input from Gary Brown and John Winkle as we use him as an advisor and part of this. So I would ask if there's any questions and recommend that these, my recommendations and line item reductions be adopted by the board.
You have an extra copy of that?
Where are we? Are we looking at the $613,580?
Yes, that's the budget we're looking at.
Okay.
And included on that next page then is what you are recommending on budget proposal and recommendations.
Yes, the EMS budget has operated as both the services and the management budget, and until recently we haven't had a commission. Now that we have a commission, the commission itself is required by code to continue to roll over unspent funds, but the county side is no longer required to do that. And we had built up about 126,000. That's now reduced to 73,500 in rollover funds. And in order to expend funds from that 73,000, board approval is required anyway. So I would advise using 60,000 of that in order to reduce, in order to be returned to the taxpayer. Use that towards the fiscal year 16 budget, and then keep a $13,000 500 rollover in order for any actual emergencies or under budgeting this year. It would not be added to, and I also point out it more than covers any all of the cuts I'm suggesting, so that if there was a problem, they wouldn't have to come back to the board and find new revenue.
So as a simple person, you're saying that there was a reserve amount that was kept year to year that would essentially roll over.
Right, I'll just read.
And then $60,000 of that being less in a reserve there can be used to offset the cuts that you're recommending.
Correct, I'll just read my preface then. EMS operates on allotment, which has given them the ability to roll over unspent funds, which now is $73,500. For at least 10 years, this has never been needed, and for the last several years has been added to. This fact that over budgeting has consistently occurred only solidifies my recommendations for cuts to follow. This is not typical to other departments, and the only reason this happened is the EMS account acted previously as the funding source for the Management Commission, separate, which is statutorily required to retain all unspent funds. This was legally improper and has been corrected with the Commission's recent formation. So I recommend, and I'll just start moving, I would move, number one, that our finance director change this from allotment to actual reimbursement, and he's expressed that to me, meaning that this would not continue to build up a rollover, but any unspent funds would revert to the county, as I say there.
Okay, you want to make a motion, Matthew? So we get what you want?
Right. I moved that the finance director be ordered to change this from allotment to actual reimbursement.
Second.
Okay, discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. Okay, then what?
I would then move that $60,000 of the rollover be be used for the fiscal year 16 EMS budget.
I'll second. Discussion?
How does this fit in with the emergency services budgeting?
What we've been using the carryover for is to operate the department and operate STARCOM. We bill for STARCOM on actual expenses, and then we receive that back from the partners in STARCOM. So that's why there was a reserve fund there, and that's what it was used for. The same way on the emergency management side, we received 1/12 of the county's allocation monthly. We had to pay our own bills, and then when we would receive the allocation, that fund wasn't a reserve, it was a revolving fund for operating the department.
So how are you going to operate without this fund?
Well, would just become dependent on the regular county budget.
I don't think they have operated on this fund recently.
No, that's the way we're currently today operating on it. I mean, that's how 1/12 of our budget comes from Denny every month, goes into this account. Same way with STARCOM. We pay the STARCOM bills. We bill the customers, the partners, and they pay us back. So this budget number goes up and down month to month, day to day, depending on how many bills.
I heard something different from Dennis. Do you want to?
Right. The number is stable. We just take 1/12. We send it over to them every month. And what's happening, back to what Matthew's saying, is this actually increases. If they underspend their budget, it's going to increase the carryover. If he overspends his budget, he has to come back to the board, and then we usually increase his allocation if it's justifiable. And the way we do it now is exactly like we do STARCOM. That's why STARCOM really doesn't need a cash carryover, because on an accrual basis, the expenses and income will match up, because they're billing exactly after the income comes in on STARCOM. They bill us what their cost is the month after. This will come about the way Matthew's proposed here and been passed, is they will bill the month, say month of July, they'll bill us the actual cost less any other revenue, which they have no other revenue, and now we'll pay that in the following month of August. The latest would be September, usually in the month of August. As soon as they get the bill in, we process it. So on accrual basis, it'll show cash basis at June 30th, you'll be behind 1 month. But on accrual basis, which we go by on our financials, there'll be even money. So there really is not much of a need for reserve, except what Matthew's saying. If something did come up, there's still $13,000 still there to fund it without coming back to the board for money, except it still takes a board amendment, which has to come before the board now, not the commission.
Just to make clear to me, if it's their operating funds from month to month, you're paying the bills a month behind, and you have a place to draw those funds from?
It'll actually show in the negative for 1 month. The $13,000 may cover it for 1 month or partially cover it, but yes, it will show in a negative. But on accrual basis, this will balance out, and that's what we have to go on.
I understand what you're saying, Denny, but
Okay.
how are you paying negative? I don't understand that part.
You're doing it on anticipation of revenue coming in. It will be covered.
You're cutting checks,
Yes, we are.
and it's being drawn on what account?
It'll be drawn back on our general supplemental out of the line item for ES allocation. Now, if they don't spend all the allocation, that money in that allocation falls back into the general supplemental reserves instead of falling into the ES fund. So basically, I keep referring back to accrual, we balance out to zero. We have to pay what they
I understand the
submit.
balancing out, and
Yes.
it works for the books. I'm just trying to make sure it works for the department.
It'll work for the department because it's worked for STARCOM. We've been doing it this way for a long time. If you look at the fund balance July 1st, we spend $30,000 1 month. Yes, it's going to show in the negative on the cash balance, but we have accounts receivable coming back in to cover that $33,000. So when we do period 13, which we run through July and August, it'll all balance out back to zero. Yes, there'll be a negative amount in the ES fund if there's enough reserves to cover it.
This is the way all departments work, isn't it?
Yeah,
Pretty much.
Pretty
It's
much.
not a checking account, right?
But it's a fund.
It's a fund. It just runs in the red, but it's not the checking account.
Right.
The only
Overall-
difference now is we're not going to build it, we're not going to have $73,500 over. We're drawing some of that down.
Correct.
We're still leaving $13,500.
Yes.
Which probably ought to be put in this budget under some kind of a label.
Well, you don't want to put it into the budget of 13 because then that gives them authority to spend it. You want to keep it away from the budget. Cash reserves should never be budgeted within the budget. But that 13 should always be there because we're reimbursing on actual costs. If there's money left in, say it's 613,000, only spend 580, the balance goes back in the general supplemental instead of the ES fund the way we do it now.
Okay.
On actuals.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. All right.
One-
Next item.
Mark, one question. When would you like actual reimbursement to start? July 1st? Or do you want to, probably desirable to start July 1st?
The 60?
The actual reimbursement where they bill us and then we pay them out of next year's budget.
July 1.
Okay. And what may happen if they don't spend all their budget this year, there may be a little bit more than 13. But if they spend it all, the 13 should still be there.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Now, I'm still confused between EMS budget and allocation.
Okay, what the allocation is where they have their budget. You're approving their budget. Now, the 613,000 is going to be tax dollars less the 50, Matt?
60.
60,000. That'll be less that, so you take 60 off 613. That's what we'll levy on the taxpayers in the general supplemental fund. The other thing is there's two more options, or two more that I think Matthew's going to get to. Also, the 613 will be reduced by the total amount of the line item reductions, which have you voted on those yet?
Yes.
Okay, that'll also reduce that 613 also. So you got 60 plus, I think 13 something worth of reductions. They'll reduce the tax asking, and we got three things left to do. That's on the agenda here, I believe, or part of the ES budget. And Matt can go ahead with that.
Okay. The next preface is on line item 6105, buildings, and 6350, motor vehicle. On February 10th, the board appointed John Winkle, advisor to the board, on how this $20,000, and it is now $77,125 because items 6,000 and above were voted to paid out of gaming, so that increases to $77,000, respectively, and subject to board approval. Given his input, I recommend the $20,000 be spent on infrastructure improvements to the Climbing Hill facility designed to lower the extraordinary heating costs of the building. I understand that's already been proposed by Gary Brown. I would recommend this be taken out of the CIP budget if it hasn't already been. And secondly, that the $77,125 be spent on 2 defibrillator monitors for 2 vehicles. This allotment will be more than sufficient by any estimation, but the final cost depends on possible grants, and as we work with John Winkle and Gary Brown on that, we'll find out the final costs. And I believe the leftovers, being gaming funds, they would revert back to the county if not spent, but if they could be spent on farther cost-saving modernization of Climbing Hill, I would also move that. But before there is a motion, are there any questions?
Is it appropriate to ask a question on the infrastructure improvements at this point, or is that a discussion for another?
As long as it's within infrastructure improvements, it would go toward that. I would, in my motion, I would move that it be subject to board approval so that we can take input from both Gary Brown and the mayors before expending money on that.
Okay.
Are we talking about emergency management or emergency services?
This is all services.
That's under the direction of the board.
Yes.
Mr. Winkle?
The mayor's being thrown in there.
Just been a little bit. I was asked to meet with Gary, which I did. I would classify those meetings as very positive. We worked together very well. I gained some insight into some of the areas that I didn't have 100% insight into. I made a commitment to Gary that going forward, I'm going to support him and work however I can out in the county. I think probably the only thing that might be controversial here, and maybe there is some other things, and that's whether he drives the vehicle home from Prairie Hills, from Climbing Hill. So, you know where my mind this on Prairie Hills. Anyway, and I think that's outside, that's an operational thing outside what I was charged to deal with, is I'm supposed to look at the 70,000 and the 20,000, or the 70,000 and the 45,000. But I also am very aware of a huge moving target in this budget being the 2 defibrillators. I mean, in the extreme, we could get by with 0. On the other end of the spectrum, it's going to be, you know, it's going to be a huge amount of money. It's going to be probably $70,000 to $75,000 just for those 2. And I really believe in the 2 defibrillators. Gary feels he can use one of the existing defibrillator for a period of time. So we haven't totally agreed on that. I respect his opinion and hope he respects mine. But what I have done so far, generally these grants that are out there, this process got me thinking a lot, and I've arranged already some matching dollars for one of the defibrillators. And that's part of my commitment to Gary. I've explained that to him. So I guess I would just ask some flexibility on this, because this is the first time we've ever gone through this. And so I'd ask some flexibility in that regard for Gary as we transition in this process. He's committed to me. He's doing things every day already that I've seen for the new EMA manager. He's been to a couple of classes. He gathered materials. He's gotten 2 sets, so there's a set for the new employee coming in. I mean, and there's several other things that I know I've forgotten. So I appreciate all that. It was, whoever had the idea for us to meet together was a great idea. And I think we accomplished a lot. I think EMS is going to be better in the county. And so I feel really good about all that, and want to do everything I can to support what he does. So, like I say, in the areas I've been asked to comment in, extremely positive, and it's going to be a lot better because of it. And then the flexibility thing, since this is the first time through, because if we get, let's just say, we get 2 grants and the cost is 0 for $70,000 worth of defibrillators. I mean, that's my goal. I don't know how realistic it is. And Gary, when I came in this morning, was looking over here at EMS grants. This morning, I was looking at EMS grants. We can work together. We've worked together a lot in the past. Had a few differences here and there, but by and large, I assure you we can work together. So, anyway, and I'll take any questions that I think that I could answer. So.
Thank you for your time. We burned up a couple mornings for you already.
Well worth it.
Matthew, where we go next year?
Well, the board has already appointed John Winkle advisor on these 2 line items. So I would move that line item 6105, dealing with buildings, be paid out of the CIP budget, and on infrastructure improvements to the Climbing Hill facility, subject to board approval.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Next.
Can I ask an informational question?
Hmm?
As far as the building CIP, when the infrastructure improvements to the Climbing Hill facility happen, has anybody from Mid-American and their partner companies, either Nexen or Clear Results, looked at that?
It's been a few years, but what they've identified is what we're trying to fix, and that's the glass block windows on 2nd and 3rd floor of the unheated space.
Do you know if they've incentivized that at all, Gary, as far as rebate dollars?
It's been a while since they've looked
And
at
the
it.
only reason I ask, if we can ask them as that goes forward to take another look, just so we have any rebate potentials based on the year's payback, that'd be great. Just thought I'd throw that in, sorry.
Okay.
The trucks, I'd like to speak to the trucks. This proposal is to reduce, we've got one ordered now.
Mr. Chair, could we move on the motor vehicle expense for defibrillators?
Okay.
Because trucks is after this.
And your motion is?
I would move that line item 6350.
Wait a second, you have a motion out there about
Okay. All those,
6105, right?
we got it on the floor?
We already voted on it.
No, we did not.
We didn't?
No,
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay.
thank you.
Now,
I motion line item 6350. I know. 6350 on motor vehicle be paid from gaming, amounting to up to $77,125. Be spent on 2 defibrillator monitors, subject to board approval.
need discussion?
He's only asking for 70, as I read it.
Dennis? Dennis?
You want to include line item include line item 6365 also?
Yes.
Okay.
6365 also.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor with a second.
Second.
Discussion?
I just think that's a whole budget. I don't know why we're approving line items.
Because it's coming out of different funding source. Isn't that how we do it?
Yep.
Okay.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Next.
Now the preface on vehicles. Gary Brown has already spent fiscal year 15 gaming funds on a more fuel efficient pickup from my understanding, and the recommendations are before you, but Gary, go ahead and.
Well, we have a total of 5 vehicles in our fleet. One is a retired rescue truck that we turned into a grass truck. 6, actually. We have an old Suburban that's used for plowing snow. It's not really worthy to take out on calls anymore. We just use it to clean the lot. We have 208, which is a large air truck and light truck that we use at the scene of house fires. And then we have duplicate 204 and 206, what we call as our frontline rescue trucks. What we did as a staff, and we came to the board a year ago and got funding to downsize those 2 rescue trucks, 204 and 206, from the current Ford F-450 style chassis with a utility body to a 3500 series. I'm just going to use Chevy because that's what we ordered, 4-door cab. We've ordered one of those, and our theory is to be able to cut our maintenance costs, cut our fuel costs, but to go from one of those 2 vehicles to go from 2 vehicles to 1. If we hit a deer or we're involved in an accident, we're suddenly out of business. We have nothing to carry the extra heavy equipment in that you couldn't carry in a Suburban, or you would have to tow a trailer around every place you went to carry the extra equipment. So our strategy was this year to build one of those trucks out of this year's budget, and next year to build the other truck out of resources, and then we would this year sell one of the, I think it's 206 that we want to get rid of this year, and 204 next year. But to go from a pair of those to a single would really not operationally work very well, because if we hit a deer or we break down, we've got a truck in the shop, we're out of business. The continuing on down in Matthew's memo, it talks about my vehicle being left at Climbing Hill. I respond 24 hours a day. I'm out during severe weather. I go to hazmat calls, and I am that second guy to take EMS calls during daytime hours, and I take those on the way to and from work. So it's not like I get to Climbing Hill and I can actually answer more calls, because the time I go to work in the morning is usually when we're the busiest, and I'm answering calls routinely with that vehicle when I'm available. If I don't have meetings, which with this transition I will get out of a significant number of those. I also maintain a significant amount of Starcom resources, the tower sites, which I go out to evenings, weekends, when there's an alarm or a problem at those sites. If that vehicle is stored at Climbing Hill, I'm going to have to drive my personal vehicle to Climbing Hill to get the vehicle to go back to wherever the Homer Tower site to work on something, because I carry tools and equipment in that truck, fuses, the things that we need at the tower sites. I'm a department head. I've been provided a vehicle as part of being a department head, and I work with that vehicle. So it's not like I don't take it to the grocery store. I don't use it for personal use. It's a work vehicle. It's there to maintain utilities and to be available to take calls after hours.
As far as responding to calls outside of normal hours, aren't there other staff at Climbing Hill?
Right, but I carry the hazmat expertise. I'm the extra body. We have one guy at Climbing Hill 24/7. So when there's something going on, they need help, hazardous material, drowning, those kinds of things, I respond out to those calls. And I maintain a lot of work at night going to tower sites, and if there's an alarm at a tower site, an air conditioner goes off, the lights go off, we have to be able to respond to those 24/7, and that's what I do. I respond. I'm not an 8 to 5 employee. I'm a 24-hour a day, have been for 30 years employee. So, and I see that vehicle as part of my, part of my work.
Are you're suggesting, Mr. Ung, the Suburban be housed at Climbing Hill for a second person on duty as a county EMS vehicle? Is that
Yes.
correct?
And I am that second person. So
there, how else would we have someone else that would be staffing that?
Because there are
Other individuals?
There is another shift there.
there is one person on duty 24/7, and occasionally when we have work that takes 2 guys and we have a few extra hours left in our part-timers allocation of hours, we'll bring him in. Like they were doing some heavy work this week, so we brought 2 guys in, but at that point one of them's engaged in heavy work, so he's really not a asset to change out of dirty clothes and jump in a truck and go on an emergency call. Normally that second guy is our part-timer. He covers for days off. He covers for sick leave and vacation. He covers for somebody being off on workman's, a work injury kind of thing. So we are this close to the edge on our staffing all the time, and we're only staffing with one guy. We really should be running 2 people 24/7 with the call volume and the type of work that we're doing.
The main thinking there, Supervisor Taylor, was if Gary would be at another place for another duty, this Suburban, this second vehicle, the second person on duty at Climbing Hill wouldn't have to take out a truck 204 or 206, much older, much more fuel inefficient, and so that we would have that always be housed at Climbing Hill.
It'd be operationally you're not going to save any money. It's going to cost you money, because if I'm going to drive my time off to Climbing Hill to get a vehicle to go to work, I should be allowed to charge the county mileage for that trip to go get a vehicle to go back out and go back to work for the county. And I'm out consistently in the summertime every time there's severe weather, and that would mean I would have to leave early enough from home to get to Climbing Hill, to get the vehicle, to go back, to be available during severe weather. So I think it's operationally, it doesn't make any sense. I'm available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, have been for 33 years. So,
John?
Where some of this discussion from I started, because the original idea I had to save money, and all of us are interested in saving money, but I'd suggest the 2 Suburbans, one that we had that Gary drove, and then give him a second Suburban. You've heard that plan. And I think the pickup idea I do like. At first I had some reservations, and I've expressed those, and it has to do with having equipment in the back of a pickup, and in particular, like a defibrillator monitor that costs $30,000, that's really cornerstone of the EMS going forward, I believe, with hospital changes, everything else. So I'm okay with 1 Suburban, 1 pickup. The pickup can pull the trailers. The other idea we had that we explored that I now agree with Gary on was to put the compressor in a trailer. And having looked at 208, I mean, it's not responding code 3, so it doesn't have to have as high an emergency or as high a maintenance level, although it needs to be safe, obviously. So I've agreed with him on 208 to leave it in service. And I've gotten comfortable with pickups. Whether 2 pickups is the right answer, I'm not sure. I don't really have an opinion on that.
problem is, if we have a problem with the 1 pickup, we have no rescue equipment, no way to carry rescue equipment in anything smaller than what we're, 2,100 PBW is minimum.
What I was hearing is the mayors wanted 2 people out there during the
EMS.
workday.
Right, 8 to 5, correct.
Okay, is that we're still talking about that?
That
my
second person is
understanding.
going to be, I'm going to be both the department head and I'm still qualified, fully licensed and quite capable of, and we have a really good system. What we do is we based off of what we know about the call, whether we send 2 people on the first call or whether we send 1 and hold the second guy back for the next call, because we're constantly getting bang to bang, back to back calls. So based on what we know about the call, we get good information from the dispatch center, determines whether 2 of us go or 1 of us go. If 1 of us goes, then the second person stays back and is available to take the next call. And the big issue for us is daytime hours. I go out at 7 o'clock in the morning, I'm on the street, I'm taking calls from that point. Generally, I go across D12, so I'm in the county, and able to answer any calls as I'm going to work, and I'm available to answer calls on my way home. I do all the errands for the department, I stop at the courthouse, I do all of that, as I go back and forth. My problem has been up to this point, I've gotten sort of overcommitted with the emergency management stuff at TSI, and I have very little time to do that other job.
So who's out there on the weekends? If you got coverage Monday through Friday, do we have somebody on?
We are on 24/7.
Okay.
One person's 24/7.
But you have this vehicle with you, or where you're at.
Right.
And so does that, I guess the question is, does that leave us short on that Saturday, Sunday with that second person?
That's my
Well,
opinion that it does.
Monday through Friday's our problem. Weekends, the volunteers are off work in their home. We're not advocating to cover 7 days a week, 8 to 5. We're advocating to cover as much as we can Monday through Friday, 8 to 5.
How far do you live from Klein Hill?
I live over on the north side. I get on the bypass and I'm in the county.
Matthew, make a motion. I don't.
Could I maybe offer a compromise?
Sure.
I can go either way on the vehicle being a pickup or Suburban, and I don't want to have a say on whether he drives it home or not, so that's not my job. But if we change our position to have 2 pickups long-term, then right now, and I'm not sure how this works in the budget, I gotta think this through, but basically if we had a pickup with that gear on it, if he drives, kind of getting into that issue, if he drives that vehicle home, then at some point he would be driving a pickup home when we get to, and what we do then is we trade the Suburban in at that point on the second pickup. That's something we haven't discussed. Okay.
I mean, I think we're taking steps in the right direction.
Yeah, so that
by
might
getting
be
these
a
to
compromise.
So you're saying, I think that sounds good, and I think we're still, I think you had talked to me about trucks 204 and 206.
Because both of those get sold at some point.
Right. If we, and I don't know if we need a motion for this, but if we do, then I move that we put them up for bid, because the proceeds from those can go towards that pickup. Brown can still keep his Suburban, and we
have 1 pickup ordered now, and it's getting built as we speak. For budget purposes, we could hold on to that other truck, 204, for another year, so we don't have to spend the money to replace it this year. Let's get this one built, see how it works out. We're kind of doing an experiment, quite honestly, and I'm not overly concerned about our experiment by putting this equipment in this truck, but I would like to get a year under our belt with this 1-ton dually pickup. Keep the other truck so we have a backup, but we have a redundancy in case we get a wreck or have a mechanical problem. See how that new truck works out for us over the year. And
but I don't understand, because we already have truck 208, we already have a reserve, or is that not up to spec?
It's a completely different vehicle.
Yeah, I wouldn't run 208, that's the big one with the air compressor and lights. I wouldn't like to see that run code 3 as a standard course of business.
It's really heavy. Carries a big
code
20.
3 means lights and tires.
Yeah. We
generally now it can go. So.
And it's two-wheel drive. It's really made for what it's built for, and that's to take lights and air to the scene of a fire.
If you had to choose between 204 and 206 as far as trading or bidding out for a new pickup, which one would you
Well,
pick?
one of them's gonna go this year. The other one, yeah, I think 206.
Has 195,000 miles on it, and that one should go first, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
204 has 130,000 miles, or 113.
Has that process been started yet?
Of what?
Of putting 206 up?
Yeah, we've got one fire department that's interested in it. We've got to get this new truck built and get everything over on it and get it out of service, get the equipment off of it. So, I mean,
Well-
that's a 2-week deal to get.
Well, John, then as someone overseeing the gaming funds on the defibrillators, if there is excess from that, then perhaps you'd advise to
Put it on the defibrillators.
no, to put it on the
we could do that
second
too.
pickup.
Yeah.
But I'd like to get 1 year under our belt with this truck first.
All right, we got to move this along. Matthew, where are we in your
If
process?
it's necessary, I would move to put 206 up for bid.
Okay, I'll second it. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Next.
Mr. Clausen wasn't around today. I think we're still at a majority.
Yeah, we're fine.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
We're fine.
Okay.
Next.
There are 7 line items with proposed cuts.
Okay, gas and oil, 10 grand, office supplies, 2150, typing, printing, 370, postage, 200, natural gas, 9,500.
Those are the ending resulting balances, not the cuts.
Okay, so that is 13,240.
Correct.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Need a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Okay, now, do we go back to the budget and approve that with the changes?
That was the motion to accept the budget with those reductions.
Okay, all right, I got it now.
Okay, for the allocation, let's get back to that, because that does change
Yes.
our allocation. The recap of what was done was 13,240 reduction, 60,000 cash reserves, 71,125 to gaming, 20,000 CIP for a total. It'll affect our allocation out of general supplemental, reduce it by $164,365 to a total amount of, well, I had it here somewhere. I think it's right around 443,000.
Okay,
I'll get the exact number to Pat.
okay. Do we need to receive that?
So you're on G.
We are on G, correct. I think he was done with,
Do we need to receive that?
Yes.
yes.
Need a motion to receive?
So moved.
Need a second?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. County Capital Improvement Fund.
Okay, we're finally there. Okay, what we have here, we have a 5-year planner. We try to update every year. Again, this will change when you get to possibly a 16. We actually show who submitted it, what they want done, and how we're going to fund it. As you can see, Conservation is funding their request out of Conservation Reserve. The rest will be essential purpose amount or capital loan note that we've done every year for the last several years. There's a couple of changes in here. One, we just added ES for 20,000. That'll change our bottom line there a little bit. Also, we'd like to stick in there, or put in there, not stick in there, put in there 300,000 for a capital improvement up our district health building. I've talked with Kevin on this, and normally they try to pay it out of their funds on hand, but really that's a county building, our property. We should be doing the improvements to it with the approval of their district health board and the final approval really of our board that controls the building ultimately. So I'd like to put the 300,000 in there. That's an approximate estimate. Kevin could describe what the project consists of if he'd like, or if you'd told he'd say that. Also, I talked with Pat on the voting machines, and he may have some ideas on that possibly. If we don't want to fund it next year, if he has a plan, or we can do a sinking fund where we can put money aside to buy them. But do you have any thoughts on that, Pat?
No, I just, put it in because wanted to remind the board that that's lurking out there, that we're going to have to replace that equipment. I did have a conversation with Mr. Taylor about possibly, there are two different ways you can do this. You can wait and do it all at once, where it's a huge expense, and bid it out. But we probably still recommend with the system that we're using now, you could also do it incrementally, put things in through that way. But that's something we can talk about, so we don't. I did purchase some equipment this year, some used machines from a county that was updating their equipment so that we would have more equipment available. We have 6 spares. During one general election, we used all 6 of those spares. If we would have lost one more, we would have been counting votes by hand, and we've gone through that before, and we don't want to do it again.
So, what's the pleasure? Leave them in, move them out, incremental?
Well, Pat, do you want to leave some in for next year? Do it on an increment basis, or you want to take it all out?
I would, if we incrementally would be my recommendation.
2 or 3 year process?
Right. 3-year process.
2 year?
3-year process.
Okay.
Okay, so 750,000 divided by 3, which is 250. So we would have 250 in this CIP?
Correct.
All right.
So that'd make our total CIP come to $1,329,500 with addition of the $300,000 and addition of $20,000 less, approximately $500,000, which will be a bond issue. And my numbers, I'm just doing this by hand, so I want to double check them.
Will be a bond issue?
Not a bond issue, capital loan note.
Okay.
No, because, sorry, capital loan note. And what we do in the future here, we usually borrow the money sometime through the fiscal year. So I'm suggesting, or I'd like to do, is borrow, would not use reserves for the interest through the fiscal year 16 and actually levy taxes to pay the principal the following year 16, 17, because a lot of times I wait till the middle of the year or toward the end of the year to borrow the money. So it'd be no problem. I already checked with the banks that we deal with, and they have no problem as long as we pay the interest. It's sufficient to do it this way. So.
Okay, so we need to receive this with that change?
Yes.
Need a motion?
Denny?
Yes.
You're at 1,003,000 something?
Yes.
We started this out at 800,000. Then it went to $1 million, I believe.
You mean every year?
Yeah.
Okay, it varies every year. One year we borrowed $1,369,000 because we did the jail plus some other projects.
Right, but I'm talking about how this started.
Right.
With a revolving was 800,000.
Well, it wasn't really revolving. It was, that just happened to be the loan at that point, that year for CIP projects. That varies. It's not a really revolving loan fund. It's a fund that holds the money there to pay the CIP projects. So 800 maybe 1 year, 845 1 year, maybe $1,003,000 in 1 year. Each project cannot go over 1.2 million. So you could have 10 projects in 1 year and borrow 12 million without a vote of the people, because 1,000,002 falls under our cap per project.
Right, but what I'm talking about is the county policy was, written or not, to just, use it as a bond fell off, you could replace it with another
Correct.
bond. But this continues to grow, Denny.
Well, some years it grows. Now this year we're at 849,000. This next year will be $1,329,000. The following year could be 800.
Yeah,
but there's no policy set at exactly at 800,000. It vary every year. But our intent was to have 5-year payments, and now where one comes off, one falls on. Now they may vary a little bit. Some years there may be a tax asking decrease. Some years there may be a tax asking increase. Depends how much we're borrowing.
All right, what I'm getting at is this continues to grow. And pretty soon you're going to be up in the $2 or $3 million range. $1.3 million is kind of scary to me. But we're increasing our borrowing every year.
Well,
that's not true.
Well, the only time
it's gone up and down.
The only time
it varies up and down. It does. Right now, I think we're right around $3 million. Our bonding capacity is $297 million. So for a county our size,
I understand
we
all
are
that.
borrowing very much money.
We've been very prudent about not going in debt. We've done a good job.
Yes, yes, excellent.
But I don't like the way things are going now because they are increasing.
I would move we accept this capital improvement plan with the change in voting machines to 250,000.
Second.
Discussion?
So it's a decrease, just so we're clear, that's a decrease from 750 to 250.
You're decreasing $500,000.
Okay.
Right.
And adding 20,000, which you already did through the ES. And then we're adding 300,000, which is new for district health, that normally they take care of it, but really it's our problem. It really should come on our loan, and it's on a 5-year loan, because there's another issue we're going to tackle here in a little bit.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay.
Nay.
All right. Local option sales tax fund.
Okay, in this fund here, I've included a sheet there that will be adjusted by that $12,259. That'll be spent, because we're going to move it over to the invest in Woodbury County. But in this sheet here, it does show you how much is going to be carried over to next year. It shows you the income coming in for fiscal year 16, and also shows what obligations the board has done already. After those obligations, the carryover and the income coming in, you still have $615,455 is unobligated. Just to remind you, we did pass a deal, and we need to talk with David Liza, our economic development. Some of this 615 could be used to put into the investment in Woodbury County as it is needed. So we'll come back with a definite number there, but with this, I am budgeting the whole, the carryover money, so it is there available to do it without another budget amendment.
Need a motion?
To receive, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Move to receive.
Second?
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. All right, discussion and action on moving one uniform patrol deputy funding from general basic to rural basic. That got Jack's attention.
Okay, what this does here, I've been asked what we could do to help our dilemma in our general basic fund. This is one option. Yes, it does help us in our expenditures, the revenue, getting it equalized to zero, but this does increase the taxes in rural basic. Right now, we presently got a $46,000 tax decrease, so it actually increased the taxes out in the rural. Well, I'm sorry, we have a $46,061 tax asking decrease. So this, moving that over to actually have come back to a $40,686 increase. Now that is an increase on the rural basic, which is, Jack will talk here in a minute. It's very insignificant because when we do our countywide taxes, it does still going to reduce their taxes out in the rural area on the county, tax askings. We're just one part of the tax bill. You got schools, you got everything else involved here that we have no control of, but we're doing our part here. Okay, Jack.
How many patrols are now funded out of rural basic?
Okay, currently right now, there are 12 out of general basic and 9 out of rural basic.
I'm opposed to this because they keep cutting back and putting a extra tax burden on the rural basic fund. I know they say the patrol is out there in the rural area, but how many of you, and going down Highway 20, if you happen to have an accident or something, does the city patrol come out and look after you, or is it the sheriff's patrol that comes out and checks on you? So you're paying for it, so you ought to not be shoving that off onto the rural taxpayers all the time. You say they're out there, but those rural taxpayers comprise approximately 10 to 20% of the population of the county, but they are producing way more than 10 or 20% of the tax funds that come into the general basic fund. So I think that you ought to be funding these patrol out of the general basic and leave the rural basic alone. You say these people are out there patrolling in the rural area. You look at the jail, I don't know how you can do it, but as I look at the people that are incarcerated there, 80 to 90% of the people incarcerated in the jail come from Sioux City. But yet the rural basic is, or the general people out there in rural fund are having to pay for those people when they don't contribute hardly anybody that's put in the jail. So if you can shove the the patrol out on the rural basic, maybe you ought to cut some of the funds or the costs that the jail is shoved onto the rural basic, rural people. I think we're putting in our fair share as it is, and I'm opposed to this. As you've heard me here before, and sometimes I guess it's always been futile, but I'm still here trying to hold the line and leave it off of the rural basic.
Thanks, Jack.
And I respect what Jack's saying, but when it comes to the jail by law can only be paid out of the county general basic fund, so that's why it has to be paid out there. Uniform patrol can be paid out of rural basic. This has been proven in several tests in court that it is legal to do that. There are options maybe in long-term planning we can talk about, but today's not the time to talk about, but in the long term there is some options.
Well, I agree with Mr. Burright. The only reason this transfer is being made is to balance the budget. There's no reason to do this. And I don't know what else I can say.
Need a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Need a second? I'll second it. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay.
Nay.
Okay, next item up for bid, discussion and action on Siouxland District Health allocation for 2016. Sorry, Kevin, we finally got here.
Okay, I did. Oh, boy.
Does that mean you're done, Kevin?
Throw it in, yes. Thank you, Larry.
Okay, what we're talking about here, there was a law passed several years ago where district health boards could have 20% reserve in their fund balances carryover. With that said, they have amended the bill or the law where now anything created before July 1st, 2012 does not have to follow that procedure. And when I say 20%, that is anything over 20% of their accrued expenses. Example, if they had $1 million in their cash carryover and they only needed $800,000, they had to return the $200,000 back to the county that they're located in. So with that said, when we do the calculations on our accrued audit, and then we have to wait till it's audited so we got the right numbers, we showed $5,251,017. 25% carry would be $1,312,754. The actual accrued audit carryover per the audit was $1,446,525. The difference between the actual and the 25% is $133,771. I did go up and talk to Kevin, and we pretty much kind of came to a conclusion here. There's two options to potentially get the money back to the county. One is cut their allocation, which is less desirable because then when you look next year, you'll see the allocation reduced, and now they come in with a big increase. The next option is to do a cash transfer from the district health fund to the general basic fund in an amount of $133,771, which we'd use to help offset our shortfall this year. Again, this varies every year, so it is a little bit, I hate to say rolling the dice, but it is a little bit there. But this is one way to get our deficit down in our general basic fund. We've done it the last 2 years. Last year was $217,000. I think the year before was $300-some thousand. But the caution is, I agree, I think we should do this, but I always have to tell everything, and it could come back and bite us next year, just like the health insurance. We don't know, but that's the risk we got to take.
You're good with this?
Right. The only thing I have to do as far as formality, since this is at the direction of my Board of Health, that at our March 10th meeting, this is what the recommendation I'm taking to them is a transfer of the cash this fiscal year in that amount of $133,771. So that's on March 10th. So we should get it.
We have to receive it today so he can print some stuff tomorrow. So take a motion to receive.
I move to receive.
Need a second.
Second.
Discussion. Dennis, you always have discussion.
No,
Go.
just one short one. Their board meets the March 10th in the morning, so when we meet, I'd like to set the hearing date, which we'll do before we're done here at 5 o'clock that night. So we'll know their decision, but Kevin will push for it, and if I have to, I could go up and help with that, whatever. And I think it's probably go through.
Very good.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. Last item, yay!
Jeremy's going to handle this, and I'll answer any questions after that.
Well, one of the things I just want to commend all our department heads or elected officials on is the memo went out enclosing a list of line items by department division that were expended 50% or less. I mentioned that earlier. There were a potential, if I remember correctly, Dennis, you can correct the figure if I'm wrong, of $153,347.
Correct.
And what we asked department heads and elected officials to do is to take a look at the line items that had not been expended 50% year to date and come back to us if there were reservations with this because of end of the year expenditures or bulk purchases. And I think we have fabulous news. I think all taxpayers should be excited about this. Hopefully everybody who's hung on and been in the room. So what have you found, Dennis, in response?
Okay, what we found, I visited with every one of the departments, divisions involved here. We went through it. They all agreed, yes, we can make the cuts. The one thing they'd like to stipulate a little bit, that if they do run into a problem toward the end of the year, they can come back to the board and do a budget amendment. They have to provide, good information saying it's required, or they need it. Elected officials, you can't, the board doesn't intend to shut anybody down. So that's a kind of requirement that they could come back. I don't think anybody has a problem with that because we amend the budgets every year. But this is actually helping us with our shortfall, and the good news is coming back at $127,097 through these various reductions here that I'll have to make into budgets. So again, they've been very cooperative, and it's been a help.
One of the things I just wanted to mention on veterans assistance, and I was going to save this for the committee meeting report, but they have not expended to the level on assistance, but they're looking at loosening some of the parameters for that in a responsible way, so that they may see more assistance, but they wanted to be held harmless, especially on funeral services, to be able to provide those for veterans at $7,200. So I just wanted to demonstrate there's been a lot of give and take, and I'm just very appreciative. Thank you all.
I think this is great. It's
fabulous.
It's a very proactive step, and like you said, the county has come back and said we can make this work. Just looking at, if we wouldn't have done anything, we would have gone from what I'm seeing, 709,000 to 794,000 if we just didn't even look at this. So by just going on autopilot, we would not have this potential before us, and last year's budget 709 spent halfway through roughly 165. That's far less than 50%. So it's a very sensible step, and again, just great job to Supervisor Taylor and the rest of the county.
Oh, and Dennis deserves some credit for...
And Dennis.
And it does show that, when we turn in budgets, we need line items in the budgets. Line are the base, and then we'll have other performance, categories next year to go through. But this is the guts of the whole budgeting, is line items that come to the division total, the department totals, the fund totals. And so, we kind of approved them overall, but we went back and looked at them again.
I'd take a motion to receive.
Move to receive.
Need a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. You have a round number?
I got now this is adding up and down and all sideways and crossways, but for our general basic, with all the changes we've done today, we are now $39,629 in the positive. We have more revenue coming in than expenditures because we did a lot of changes today.
So we're way below 350.
We'll be at the 350. Now we get to the tax asking side. Overall, we had changes within two different funds, but overall, we will now have a tax asking decrease. And remember, I got to audit these numbers to make sure I'm right. But right now, it's $409,175 below our current tax askings. This is great this year, but just a caution, there's a lot of things we've done this year that may not be available in 17, but we'll handle that when we get there.
What percent is that?
Well, I didn't get down to percents. I need to
We
calculate.
started at 1.19, correct?
Yeah, when we started, we were actually, our starting position was, we were up in tax asking by $268,908. So we trimmed the tax asking $677,000.
When's the last time the county went down in tax askings from one?
Tax askings, I can go back at least 10 years, it's never happened. Because we've always used allowable growth to, help pay ongoing expenses. This year, we had a different philosophy a little bit. But, we'll have to return that maybe a little bit next year. But this year, and I can go back more years, it's probably been a long time since we've actually had a tax asking decrease. Quite a while, past 10 years.
Thanks for all your work.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Stallman.
Greg Stallman, Sheriff's Office. The room that was approved for Trosper Hoyt for our electronic monitoring was approved for the center room. We need the room on the right. Just want to make sure.
It doesn't make any difference to me. Make any difference to anybody else? I think you're good to go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's see, what do we got?
Committee reports to go back to?
You really want to do those?
No, otherwise we kick the can.
I know.
I'll be quick if I.
All right, go for it.
I had just on committee reports, and I'll be brief. Simcoe, I had the pleasure of attending last week over lunch and received a very good financial audit from third-party validation, and heard from the Housing Trust Fund in a report how they helped to bring in revenue to Woodbury County in excess of $97,000 over the last 18 months, mainly for the elderly and disabled on a fixed income, and heard from CERTs on their work and getting the message out and trying to act as a conduit so they can speak to one of our community groups. Veterans Affairs.
That's good.
Great committee, great folks. Philosophy, I talked a little bit about emergency assistance. Two things I'd like to put on the agenda for next week, Mr. Chair. They're looking to have the possibility of a couple of dedicated parking spots for their patrons, veterans coming in. Again, let's not take that up now, but have it properly noticed for next week. And then I'd also like to talk about utilities, which continues to be a concern there. And there's some changes in the parameters for assistance, which I mentioned.
Got that, Karen?
And then finally, Siouxland District Health, wonderful meeting with Kevin Green, who shared their mission. This is, I don't know if I'd ever been in the whole facility, but wonderful, maybe best kept secret sort of thing. Health services, education, disease prevention, clean, professional. I was very, very impressed with their vaccination education, their water quality safety inspection, and in-house laboratory. The two things you heard a little bit from Kevin on looking at an architect's design on how to have a single intake point, and we also talked about some ideas for effective services and collaboration. I'm very impressed. So those are my three.
Anybody else? I got a big long list. We have some folks that have been here since 10 o'clock waiting to meet with us, so.
One thing, can we set the public hearing March 10th, 5 o'clock?
Yeah.
Be on our new meeting schedule, 4:30, so this gives people enough time even after work to try to get here if they so desire to be here. So it'll be 5 o'clock if that's
very good.
Okay.
Sounds good.
On committee meetings, I'm not a member of this committee, but the region had a crisis intervention meeting at the library, and one of the supervisors that are on that committee should probably go. It's either Sioux Falls or Lincoln on a road trip.
We will get with Mr. Drew to make sure we've got it all taken care of. Anything else for the good? Public comment? Mike, we're going to run that through that thing for GPS. It'll go on the agenda.
Next week?
Yeah.
One more thing, Mr. Chair. It's the annual report for the fiscal year for the Siouxland District Health Department. I'm just passing it out. I won't talk about
Cool. Thank you. Anyone else?
I asked the members if Mr. Clausen excused him for just, he missed 3 votes. Do you want to be recorded on those? Does the assembly want to allow him to do that?
That's all right.
Okay.
Okay. Need a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
I'll second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. We have to go upstairs right now.
We've already you guys before.
First. Then you